Chapter 37-39. Genius in a second. Remember to go away. Shaw or net, providing you with wonderful novel reading. Young Jean really wanted to say that he wasn't acting tough and that he really didn't know anything about the Burning Sky sect. Of course, even if he said he wasn't acting tough, no one would believe him. At this moment, the most shocked person was undoubtedly Ancestor Yingtian. This guy actually dared to look down on the Burning Sky sect. Could it be that he came from a force stronger than the Burning Sky sect? Otherwise, how could he dare to say that he didn't know anything about the Burning Sky sect? Little guy, don't be too arrogant. Be careful that you don't die young. The Qingyun Path Master stared at Yang Zhon and said with a gloomy face, "Damn it. What does it have to do with you whether I'm arrogant or not?" Yang Zhon glanced at the Qingyun Path Master and said disdainfully, "Are you courting death?" The Qingyun Pathmaster's tone immediately turned cold. He stared at Yang Zhon with a cold gaze. If looks could kill, Yang Zhon would have died many times over. "I'm courting death. So what? You can kill me. Stop joking." Yang Zhon shrugged and said nonchalantly. In his opinion, Boss Jiu Fei was the strongest existence. These guys weren't even worthy of carrying his shoes. Even Ancestor Yingtian wasn't in his eyes. Brother Fei was really amazing. Yang Zhon was very clear that he was just an immortal. If it wasn't for Brother Fei, he would still be a peak Hutian cultivator. Immortals. In his eyes, they were almighty and omnipotent existences. In the past, he didn't even dare to think that he could become an immortal. Boom. At this moment, the ancestor of the Wutian sect attacked without saying anything. He didn't believe that the four quasi-supremes couldn't take down this little guy. The ancestor of the Wutian sect's right hand instantly enlarged and enveloped a part of the sky. The entire sky instantly darkened as if night had suddenly descended. The extreme yin qi was vast and mighty. The void that was enveloped by the black hand instantly froze. This was an extreme coldness that could freeze the void. The Wutian sect's cultivation technique was very powerful. It was the Extreme Yin Immortal Codex. It cultivated the Extreme Yin Qi. The Wutian sect's ancestor would usually freeze thousands of miles with a single move. However, he didn't dare to act recklessly here because this was the Ying Tian ancestral ground. He had to control the Tai Yin Qi so that it wouldn't spread in all directions. Otherwise, this move alone would have frozen the mountain where the Yingtian ancestral hall was located, and all the people who were watching the show would have turned into human-shaped popsicles. Boom. Yang Zhon was directly slammed into the ground by the giant hand that descended from the sky. A giant palm print appeared on the square in front of the Yingtian ancestral hall, sinking deep into the ground. Seeing this, everyone was dumbfounded. The vast and mighty wave of cold air almost froze the onlookers. It turned out that there was a price to pay for watching the show. At this moment, a human-shaped object floated out from the giant handprint on the ground. It looked like a paper man as it floated up. What? This time, old ancestor Yingtian and the others were dumbfounded. The Wutian sect's strength was undeniable. He was a quasi-supreme being, the sect ancestor of a region. His strength was definitely not inferior to the Yingtian sect. The Wutian sect ancestor was an existence that could stand on equal footing with old ancestor Yingtian. Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Yang Zhon suddenly swelled up like an inflatable doll, and in the next moment, he returned to normal. Yang Zhon was like a cockroach that couldn't be killed. However, the power that Jiu Fei had placed on his body couldn't last forever. Yang Zhon was consuming Jiu Fei's power. Once the power that Jiu Fei had placed on his body disappeared, he would be in deep trouble. "Brother Fei, I can't hold on for much longer." Yang Zhon was somewhat uneasy. He hurriedly transmitted his voice to Jiu Fei, who was still watching the show from the crowd. "Let's play a little more and let these four guys know how powerful you are. A man can't be afraid." Jiu Fei transmitted his voice to Yang Zhon. "Then let's play with these four old guys for a while. However, Brother Fei, you have to watch me." Yang Zhon transmitted his voice to Jiu Fei. Since Brother Fei had already said so, he could only bite the bullet and fight. "I know, with me here, you won't die," Jiu Fei assured Yang Zhon. 4 old farts, come at me together, young Jean said coldly as he hooked his finger at old ancestor Ying Tian and the others in the sky. Brothers, what are you waiting for? Let's fulfill this little guy's wish. Old ancestor Ying Tian said coldly as he stared at young Jean below. Green Cloud Pathmaster, Wu Tian Sect Ancestor, and Shiju Palace Master exchanged glances and nodded. Kill. Almost at the same time, the 4 Quasi-Supremes attacked at the same time. The power of 4 Quasi-Supremes erupted at the same time and directly obliterated young Jean. The void between heaven and earth was directly shattered. This was the void of the ancestral realm, which was extremely stable. However, the power of the 4 Quasi-Supremes attacking at the same time was too strong, as if it could crush everything. Kill. Young Jean didn't retreat. He directly soared into the sky and attacked the 4 Quasi-Supremes in the sky. His long hair danced wildly, and he was extremely domineering. The peak of life, this was definitely the peak of life. He actually fought against 4 Quasi-Supremes alone. If this was not the peak of life, then what was? Since the peak of life had arrived, young Jean naturally wanted to explode with vigor. A supreme power of the way of the sword erupted from his body. 9 beams of immortal sword light appeared around him. Each beam of sword light emitted a chilling sword aura that would make even quasi-supreme beings shudder. This was the strongest killing move that Ji Yu Fei had added to Young Jean's body, the first sword of the 9 heaven punishment swords. In the next moment, the 9 sword lights around Young Jean soared into the sky, breaking through the layers of Quasi-Supreme's power and piercing towards the 4 Quasi-Supremes. What, old ancestor Ying Tian and the others only felt a chill in their bodies. The monstrous murderous aura assaulted their bodies, causing them to shiver all over, as if their souls were trembling. The murderous aura emitted from the 9 sword lights was so strong that even old ancestor Ying Tian and the others couldn't help but be moved. The 9 heaven punishment swords was originally an extreme sword Dao that entered the path of killing. Once the 9 swords were unleashed, even an extreme supremes would retreat, let alone other experts. At this time, old ancestor Ying Tian and the others were shrouded by the murderous aura, as if they were in a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Although they knew it was an illusion, it still made them feel terrified. This sword Dao, old ancestor Ying Tian directly took out his quasi-supreme fairy weapon, which was an immortal sword surrounded by chaotic qi. Old ancestor Ying Tian cultivated the great path of chaos. Buzz. The primal chaos immortal sword let out a deafening cry and met the sky-piercing sword light. At this time, Green Cloud Pathmaster and the others also had to take out their special skills. All of them took out their self-refined quasi-supreme fairy weapons, and extremely terrifying power erupted from their bodies. In the next moment, several screams were heard. Old ancestor Ying Tian and the other quasi-supremes flew back at the same time, and the blood of quasi-supremes dripped from the sky. There were several sword wounds on the bodies of old ancestor Ying Tian and the other quasi-supremes, from which blood constantly seeped out and dyed their clothes red. The Wutian sect master was in an even worse state. The golden crown on his head was cut off by the heaven punishment sword light, and his hair was disheveled. There was even a bloodstain between his eyebrows. He was almost pierced between his eyebrows by Yang Zhon's heaven punishment sword light. Thinking of the scene just now, Wutian sect master's clothes were soaked in cold sweat, but he didn't know that he had just taken a spin at the gates of hell, and was almost killed by Yang Zhon's sword. Everyone in the surroundings was dumbfounded. The 4 ancestors attacked at the same time, but they were still forced to retreat by that person. How was this possible? This was heaven-defying. My brother, you're amazing, one of the young cultivators exclaimed. However, compared to the 4 great founding ancestors, Yang Zhon was in a much more miserable state. There were 4 bloody holes on his body, and the space between his eyebrows had been pierced by Palace Master Shiju's finger. If it was an ordinary person, he would have died long ago. However, this person was Yang Zhon, and he had the power of Ji Yu Fei's blessing on his body. However, after he used the first sword of the 9 heaven punishment sword, the power of Ji Yu Fei's blessing on his body was almost exhausted. That was the strongest attack. This attack forced the 4 ancestors to retreat, but he was also heavily injured. Although it wasn't to the extent of dying, his vitality was greatly damaged. "I've finally reached the peak. I have no regrets in this life." Young Jean's tyrannical aura was quickly disappearing, but his injured body was rapidly healing. Very quickly, his injuries were completely healed. At this time, the elders and disciples who came with young Jean were incomparably shocked and envious. Young Jean was actually so powerful. They couldn't believe that there was such an existence hiding beside them. Based on the battle strength young Jean displayed, if he wanted to kill them, it would be much easier than killing an ant. One had to know that this guy dared to compete with the ancestors. Not everyone could become a sect ancestor. In the primogenitor realm, heavenly venerables could establish a sect, but the truly ancient forces had at least a quasi-supreme being. Although heavenly venerables were powerful, they weren't considered much in the primogenitor realm. Even a sect established by a quasi-supreme being was only a second-rate sect in the primogenitor realm. In the primogenitor's realm, there were many first-rate sects. In fact, there were even super first-rate sects. The reason why Ying Tianzong attached itself to the wood race was because the wood race had a sovereign overseeing it. They were first-rate cultivation forces. His aura is weakening. What's going on? At this time, Ying Tian ancestor and the others felt the change in Yang Zhon's body and were inexplicably shocked. "Kill!" Ying Tian ancestor roared and directly attacked. With a wave of his right hand, a dragon-shaped sword Qi immediately rushed out of his hand and fiercely pounced towards Yang Zhon. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kill Yang Zhon. Ying Tian ancestor would definitely not miss this opportunity. However, the Blue Cloud Pathmaster, Sha Absolute Palace Master, and the Skyless Sect ancestor were very cautious and did not make a move. Chapter 3740. Genius in 1 second. Remember, love, go away. This is the web that provides you with wonderful novels to read. Old ancestor Ying Tian's murderous aura was shocking. He directly attacked Yang Zhon. The chaotic golden light that rushed out of his hand turned into a chaotic dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws at Yang Zhon, who was falling from the sky. The cold sword Qi spread out, and the air seemed to be frozen. "Brother Fei, save me." Yang Zhon hurriedly transmitted his voice to Jiyu Fei. At this time, he could feel that the extremely tyrannical power that Jiyu Fei blessed him with was quickly fading away. The current Yang Zhon had almost been beaten back to his original state. Sigh. Jiyu Fei, who was mixed in the crowd, sighed helplessly. The next moment, a fist appeared in the void and directly smashed on the dragon-shaped sword light that was pouncing towards Yang Zhon. Boom! With a loud bang, the dragon-shaped sword light exploded in an instant, turning into countless chaotic light and dissipating in the void. Within the chaotic light, there were chaotic Dao patterns that were dissipating. At this moment, the cultivators around Jiyu Fei were all scared out of their wits and immediately scattered away. Everyone looked at Jiyu Fei as if they were looking at a monster. Everyone couldn't believe that there was actually a peerless expert hidden among them. Just now, Jiyu Fei just waved his fist in the air and directly smashed the dragon-shaped sword light of old ancestor Ying Tian. Such a method was too frightening. One had to know that old ancestor Ying Tian was high and mighty in everyone's eyes. He was a quasi-supreme who ruled the life and death of countless living beings in the billions of miles of land. In the eyes of these living beings, he was a supreme existence. "He even looked at me just now." A female cultivator looked at Jiyu Fei like an infatuated fool. "Who said he was looking at you?" "He was looking at me. He was infatuated." Another extremely beautiful fairy said. "Is this guy pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger?" An immortal expert exclaimed. The immortal cultivators of the younger generation stared at Jiyu Fei with envy, jealousy, and hatred. This black-robed youth looked young, but he was actually powerful enough to contend with the founding ancestor of the Ying Tian sect. This was simply a miracle. Of course, in the world of cultivation, one's appearance was the most unreliable. Some experts who were successful in their cultivation would maintain their youthful appearance. There were also some experts who didn't pay too much attention to their appearance and kept their original appearance. Love go small say net chu. However, the people of the immortal Dao all had a sage-like appearance. The men were handsome, and the women were pretty. There were very few immortals who were too ugly. At this time, Ji Yufei waved his right hand, and Yang Zhon directly flew over to him, landing at his feet, paralyzed on the ground, shivering. He was really scared out of his wits. If Ji Yufei had acted a little later, he would have been killed by the Ying Tian old ancestor. At this time, the most shocked people were of course the elders and disciples of the 36th monastery who had come with Ji Yufei to the Ying Tian sect's ancestral land. When they saw Ji Yufei make a move, their eyeballs almost fell to the ground. How is this possible? The seemingly ordinary Ji Yufei was actually a peerless expert. Those fellows from the Ying Tian monastery had long since been scared out of their wits. No one had ever imagined that there would be such a great expert by their side. Boom! With a loud explosion, the Ying Tian old ancestor turned into a mass of primal chaos divine light that was even larger than a mountain, smashing down on Ji Yufei. Those fellows watching the battle outside the Ying Tian ancestral palace were immediately scared out of their wits. They fled as fast as they could, no longer caring about their demeanor. Brother Fei, this, Yang Zhon's terror had reached the peak. Now that the energy Ji Yufei had placed on his body had disappeared, the peerless expert who had dared to challenge the Ying Tian old ancestor in everyone's eyes had turned into a coward. He no longer dared to act like a poser. The pressure of a quasi-supreme descending from the sky caused even his soul to tremble. Ji Yufei raised his head to look at that mass of primal chaos divine light descending from the sky. A cold smile appeared on his face. That primal chaos divine light contained a shocking sword chi. That primal chaos sword chi continued to soar. It hadn't even reached the ground when the sword chi fluctuations caused the spectators who hadn't been able to dodge in time to be in an extremely miserable state. Some people staggered back, while others were directly blown into the sky by astral winds. Endless astral winds swept down from the sky, but Ji Yufei's expression was still as calm as a spring breeze. Clasping his hands behind his back, he raised his head to look at that mass of primal chaos divine light descending from the sky. That mass of primal chaos divine light directly smashed into the sky above Ji Yufei's head. At this time, Ji Yufei casually stretched out his right hand and pressed upwards. The spectators who had fled far away were all stunned when they saw this scene. It was as if Ji Yufei had pressed against a huge balloon. That mass of primal chaos divine light that was rapidly smashing downwards actually stopped in an instant. Seal. 9 primal chaos Dao patterns rushed out of Ji Yufei's hand and directly imprinted on that mass of primal chaos divine light, forcefully suppressing the erupting power of the sword Dao. This made Ying Tian old ancestor, who was desperately condensing the power of the sword Dao in the primal chaos divine light, so depressed that he almost vomited blood. What? Ying Tian old ancestor was truly shocked. He desperately urged the primal chaos immortal energy in his body, and the quasi-supreme level immortal energy erupted from his body. 9 extremely dazzling primal chaos sword lights circled around his body, but they couldn't break the power of Ji Yufei's seal. 6 Dao's immortal sealing. Ji Yufei growled, and the 9 primal chaos Dao patterns directly penetrated the primal chaos divine light and instantly imprinted on Ying Tian old ancestor's body. In the next moment, the huge primal chaos divine light directly dissipated in the void. Ying Tian old ancestor was still very arrogant a moment ago. The 9 primal chaos sword lights danced around his body as if they could kill all living things in the world. But in the next moment, the 9 primal chaos sword lights around his body directly collapsed in the void, and he directly fell from the sky. Pa die. Ying Tian old ancestor fell at Ji Yufei's feet like a dead fish. Moreover, he was facing downwards, and very embarrassed, he chewed on a mouthful of sand. Ying Tian old ancestor was almost going crazy. He, who was the ruler of an area, actually fell to the ground in front of everyone. Even if he had good self-restraint, he was still furious. He wanted to stand up, but just as he propped up half of his body, he felt his back sink, and directly had the most intimate contact with the ground. If Brother Fei didn't ask you to get up, would you dare to get up? At this time, Yang Zhon, with his hands on his waist, looked down at Ying Tian old ancestor under his feet with a face full of disdain. This. When the audience in the distance saw this scene, their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Were they seeing things? Ying Tian old ancestor was actually being stepped on by someone? Oh my, this, an older generation immortal Dao expert stared straight ahead, his voice trembling. This scene was too unbelievable. The person who was being stepped on by the black-robed young man was the founding ancestor of Ying Tian sect, Ying Tian Old Ancestor. The three quasi-supremes in the sky were also dumbfounded. Who is this person? The Wu Tian sect ancestor transmitted his voice to the other two quasi-supremes. The battle strength displayed by this black-robed young man was too abnormal, and he instantly restrained Ying Tian Old Ancestor. There was no doubt about Ying Tian Old Ancestor's cultivation. Whether it was the Wu Tian sect ancestor, the Palace Master of Shi Absolute Palace, or the Green Cloud Pathmaster, it was almost impossible for them to restrain Ying Tian Old Ancestor. Ying Tian Old Ancestor's cultivation was almost on par with the three quasi-supremes. It was very difficult to determine a winner between them, and if they really fought with their lives on the line, it would only end in a lose-lose situation. The Green Cloud Pathmaster and the Palace Master of Shi Absolute Palace both shook their heads, and their expressions were incomparably solemn. The battle strength displayed by Ji Yufei was really beyond their imagination. Roar! At this time, Ying Tian Old Ancestor roared, desperately urging the immortal force in his body, trying to break Ji Yufei's seal. However, all of this was in vain. The 9 primordial chaos Dao patterns firmly suppressed Ying Tian Old Ancestor's cultivation, and at this time, he could not even mobilize a trace of immortal force. War! Ying Tian Old Ancestor spat out a mouthful of old blood. This was a great humiliation, and he was stepped on the ground under the gaze of countless people. At this time, he wanted to die. Fellow Daoist, you've gone a little too far. The Green Cloud Pathmaster in the sky couldn't stand it anymore. His relationship with Ying Tian Old Ancestor was very strong, and they had a friendship of life and death. Seeing Ying Tian Old Ancestor being humiliated, it was impossible for him to not jump out. The strong are respected, this is not too much. Ji Yufei raised his head and looked indifferently at the Green Cloud Pathmaster in the sky. If he couldn't defeat Ying Tian Old Ancestor, then the person who was stepped on by Ying Tian Old Ancestor would be Ji Yufei, and not Ji Yufei who would step on Ying Tian Old Ancestor. Hearing this, the Green Cloud Pathmaster couldn't help but be startled. In the world of cultivation, the strong were respected. This was the most primitive law between heaven and earth, and only the strong could survive in this cruel world. If you want to fight, then let's fight. All of you come at me together. Ji Yufei looked at the 3 quasi-supremes in the sky with his hands clasped behind his back, and said nonchalantly. Seeing that Ji Yufei dared to look down on them, the Green Cloud Pathmaster and the others couldn't help but be shocked and angry. This guy was too arrogant. Didn't he know that there was always someone better than him? Even if this guy could defeat them, could he defeat the extreme grade supremes of the Wood Clan behind them? Ying Tian Sect, Skyless Sect, 10 Absolute Palace, and Green Cloud Path. These 4 sects were all forces under the Wood Clan, and their great backer was the Wood Clan. If this guy defeated Ying Tian Sect and defeated them, the Wood Clan would definitely not sit back and watch. Moreover, there were many experts of the Wood Clan watching this scene. A big shot of the Wood Clan was also watching Ji Yufei from afar. Who the hell is this guy? A big shot of the Wood Clan muttered to himself, and his eyes that were staring at Ji Yufei contracted. The situation was very unfavorable for Ying Tian Sect, and a big shot of the Wood Clan directly crushed an information transmission talisman in his hand. On the peak of a sacred mountain a million miles away, an old man suddenly opened his eyes, and a terrifying and monstrous pressure erupted from the peak of the sacred mountain, causing the entire sacred mountain to shake. What's going on? The old man stood up, and in the next moment, he took a step forward and instantly disappeared into the void. Chapter 3741. Genius in a Second. Remember Love Go? The web provides you with wonderful novels to read. The strength that Ji Yufei had displayed was simply too terrifying. Even Mu Chen, one of the 9 great martial monarch's sons of the Wood tribe who was watching the battle from afar, had a bad feeling, and had no choice but to crush an SOS talisman. Yang Zhon, watch this guy. Ji Yufei kicked Ancestor Ying Tian to Yang Zhon's feet. At this time, Ancestor Ying Tian's cultivation base was useless. Ji Yufei's 6 paths immortal sealing technique was not so easy to break. Even a quasi-supreme being wouldn't be able to break Ji Fei's secret technique. Ancestor Ying Tian was furious. If it was in the past, he could kill an ant like Yang Zhon with a slap. But now, he was only a little stronger than the average person. Behave yourself, or I'll give you 2 punches. Yang Zhon waved his fist and said to Ancestor Ying Tian, "You dare to be rude to me? I'll destroy your body and soul." Ancestor Ying Tian roared. At this time, he was no longer the high and mighty supreme ruler who looked down on the common people. Now, he was angry out of humiliation and had no dignity to speak of. The surrounding disciples of Ying Tian's sect were all dumbfounded. They had never imagined that their founding ancestor would have such a side to him. "Destroy your body and soul. I'll destroy your body and soul." Yang Zhon directly rushed up and punched Ancestor Ying Tian's head and face twice, directly knocking him to the ground. His nose was bruised and his face swollen. "If you dare threaten me again, I'll throw you into the manure pit. Do you believe me?" Yang Zhon glared at Ancestor Ying Tian, who was beaten to the ground, and roared, "Brat, you're courting death. How dare you insult our sect's ancestor like this? You're dead." The experts of Ying Tian's sect who were watching the battle from afar roared at Yang Zhon. Although they did not dare to provoke Ji Fei, they did not take an ant-like guy like Yang Zhon seriously. "Haha, I'm dead? You guys are the ones who are dead." Yang Zhon laughed. "With Brother Fei here, I'm not afraid of anyone. Even Ancestor Ying Tian was trampled under my feet. What can these guys do?" The experts of Ying Tian's sect were all shocked. It should be known that the disciples of Ying Tian's sect who could cultivate in Ying Tian ancestral land were all geniuses among their peers. But now, they were actually looked down upon by a little fellow. However, at this time, Ji Fei was confronting the 3 great half-supreme beings in the sky. The power that was released was world-shaking, no one daring to approach. The might of a quasi-supreme was so terrifying that if it wasn't for Ji Fei and the others deliberately controlling it, perhaps more than 90% of the cultivators in Ying Tian ancestral land would have died under the pressure of a quasi-supreme. "Fellow Daoist, who exactly are you? With his cultivation, it's impossible for him to be a nobody." The Green Cloud Pathmaster was very cautious. He stared at Ji Fei and said in a deep voice, "If you submit to me, won't you know who I am?" Ji Fei said with a smile. "Ha." Hearing Ji Fei's words, the Heavenless Sect ancestor couldn't help but laugh out loud. This guy actually wants them to submit to him? Is he joking? Those who could cultivate to the quasi-supreme realm were all outstanding geniuses. How could they submit to someone so easily? The reason why they submitted to the Wood tribe was because there was more than one extreme supreme being in the Wood tribe. They were one of the most powerful tribes in the ancestral realm. The Heavenless Sect ancestor and the others had no choice but to submit to the Wood tribe. However, they didn't know who Ji Fei was. How could they betray the Wood tribe and submit to Ji Fei? In their opinion, this was absolutely impossible. Rumble, at this moment, the void between the 2 sides began to vibrate. Only a quasi-supreme existence could truly shake the extremely stable void of the primogenitor realm. "It seems like you guys don't intend to submit. In that case, I have no choice but to speak with my fists." Ji Fei said helplessly. "Kill." The 3 quasi-supremes in the sky looked at each other and roared at the same time. They directly attacked Ji Fei. Extremely dazzling Dao light suddenly appeared in the sky. It was like 3 divine suns shining in the sky. The Qingyun path mainly cultivated the great Dao of thunder. 9 balls of 9th heaven purple lightning descended from the sky and blasted towards Ji Fei. The 9 balls of purple lightning seemed to have a life of their own as they enveloped Ji Fei in an instant. As the 9 balls of lightning converged, boundless lightning engulfed Ji Fei in an instant. The Heavenless Sect ancestors' tie-in celestial force was also extremely powerful. The heaven and earth were actually snowing. The tie-in celestial force spread out from the Heavenless Sect ancestor's body and the entire heaven and earth seemed to be frozen. A tie-in sword shadow rushed out from the Heavenless Sect ancestor's body and instantly soared for thousands of miles, falling towards Ji Fei from the sky. The tie-in sword light directly split the void between heaven and earth. Wherever the sword light passed, it left a shocking crack in the space. At this time, the Palace Lord of 10 Absolute Palace also attacked with all his strength. 10 different quasi-supremes rushed out from his body, each emitting an immortal light. The scene of 10 quasi-supremes rushing towards Jiu Fei was absolutely shocking. Everyone who saw this scene widened their eyes and mouths. They were shocked to the extreme. The 3 quasi-supremes filled every inch of the void between the heaven and earth. The immortal light rushed to the 9 heavens and illuminated the heaven and earth. However, in the next moment, all of the immortal light disappeared. It suddenly disappeared without any warning. A black hole-like vortex rushed to the sky and actually devoured all the quasi-supremes that descended from the sky into the vortex. Rumble, the heaven and earth shook. The black hole vortex seemed like it was going to devour the heaven and earth. The devouring power that came out of it was too powerful and terrifying. Whether it was the Azure Cloud Pathmaster's 9 Thunderballs, the Heavenless Sect Ancestor's Peerless Sword, or the Palace Lord of 10 Absolute Palaces' 10 Quasi-Supremes' divine weapons, they were all devoured by the black hole vortex. How is this possible? The Heavenless Sect Ancestor and the others were instantly scared out of their wits when they saw this scene. They never expected this guy to be so powerful. The devouring power that came out of the black hole vortex made their hearts palpitate. In the next moment, they flew towards the black hole vortex involuntarily. Roar! The Heavenless Sect Ancestor and the others roared in anger and desperately tried to break free from the devouring power. However, it was all in vain. Under everyone's terrified gaze, the 3 Quasi-Supremes were actually devoured by the black hole vortex. Jiu Fei completely suppressed the 3 Quasi-Supremes. How is this possible? All the cultivators in the ancestral land of Yingtian sect were in despair when they saw this scene. At this moment, the royal prince of the Wood clan, Mu Chen, who was watching the battle from afar, suddenly smiled. Chapter 3742. Jiu Fei completely crushed the 3 Quasi-Supremes, displaying a powerful battle prowess that left everyone in despair. All the cultivators in the ancestral ground of Yingtian sect were either disciples of Yingtian sect or experts in the cultivation world who were inextricably linked to the sect. When they saw Jiu Fei defeat Ancestor Yingtian and the other 2 Quasi-Supremes, everyone fell into despair. Yingtian sect was finished, and so were they. Run! Someone shouted. The entire Yingtian ancestral ground was in chaos. All the cultivators were running for their lives. They had no choice but to run, because if they didn't, they would be killed by this ferocious person. Even Ancestor Yingtian and the other founding ancestors were no match for this guy. Who else in Yingtian ancestral ground could compete with this guy? In an instant, immortal lights rushed out from everywhere in Yingtian ancestral ground. Someone had activated the teleportation formation in Yingtian ancestral ground in an attempt to escape. However, at this moment, Jiu Fei's figure appeared high up in the sky. With a shake of his body, countless rays of primordial chaos divine light rushed out of his body and instantly destroyed all the teleportation formations in the Yingtian ancestral land. Everyone panicked. This ferocious person had no intention of letting them go. He wanted to kill everyone in Yingtian ancestral ground in one fell swoop. What should we do? The cultivators in Yingtian ancestral ground were extremely terrified. No one wanted to die. At this moment, the black vortex disappeared. Jiu Fei directly captured Ancestor Yingtian, Palace Master Shejue, and the Azure Cloud Pathmaster. These 3 Quasi-Supremes couldn't even take one move from Jiu Fei. This was the gap between them. Even though they were all Quasi-Supremes, Jiu Fei could easily kill Ancestor Yingtian and the others. In Jiu Fei's eyes, only a pinnacle quasi-earth exalted expert would be a match for him. As for the others, no matter how many of them there were, they would still be able to suppress them without any suspense. Jiu Fei directly threw the Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the others onto the plaza in front of the Heavenless Ancestral Hall. The Heavenless Sect Forefather and the others were thrown into a miserable state. They were groaning and screaming in pain like ordinary people. When had they ever been thrown into pain before? Today, Jiu Fei had dragged these high and mighty fellows down from their pedestals. At this moment, These nearly invincible existences that dominated the world seemed to have turned into ordinary people. How is this possible? The green cloud pathmaster's voice trembled as he looked at his bruised hands. When he was thrown down from the sky by Jiu Fei, his hands were actually a bloody mess. The Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the Shi Absolute Palace Master were also covered in injuries from the fall. Looking at the sorry state of these mountain-splitting ancestors, Yang Zhon laughed out loud. What mountain-splitting ancestors? What quasi-supremes? In front of Brother Fei, weren't they just ants? Yang Zhon was even more in awe of Jiu Fei. The Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the others were embarrassed by Yang Zhon's laughter. They wanted to fight with Jiu Fei, but with their cultivation sealed, they couldn't even defeat Yang Zhon, let alone fight with Jiu Fei. This was the terror of absolute power. In the face of absolute power, no matter what schemes you had, it would be useless. If Jiu Fei wanted to kill the Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the others, he would kill them without any hesitation. However, the Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the others were quasi-supremes after all, and they still had some use. It would be a pity to kill them. Jiu Fei was very fond of talents, otherwise, he wouldn't have recruited so many subordinates. Submit or die, choose. Jiu Fei stood in the sky above the plaza, looking down at the 4 mountain-splitting ancestors and said coldly. You, the Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the others were trembling with anger. He clenched his fists tightly. Although he was mad with anger, he didn't lose his reason. How arrogant. You want the 4 quasi-supremes to submit. Just then, a loud shout came from the sky. The voice echoed in the mountains for a long time. Grandpa is here. Just then, Mu Chen rushed over from the sky. Whoosh. In the next moment, a black shadow directly appeared above the plaza. A powerful aura spread out, and the entire sky seemed like it was going to collapse. The Wood Clan finally jumped out. Jiu Fei looked at the black-robed elder in front of him and the corner of his mouth curled up, revealing a cold smile. Grandpa. Mu Chen hurried over and bowed. Good grandson, are you okay? I will tear whoever dares to hurt you into pieces. The Wood Clan's big shot stared at Jiu Fei as he spoke, his eyes flashing with ferocity. Jiu Fei smiled disapprovingly, then said, even if I kill him, what can you do to me? What did you say? Hearing this, the Wood Clan's big shot's thick eyebrows immediately stood up. His eyes flashed with ferocity, and the divine might of a peak quasi-supremes erupted from his body. Some of the experts who were watching the battle immediately screamed and fell from the sky. The divine might of a peak quasi-supremes was too terrifying, and it could crush people to death. For those with weak cultivation, even their primordial spirits would collapse, turning them into walking corpses. Under the protection of his grandfather, the celestial prince of the Wood tribe was naturally unafraid of the monstrous divine might. Jiu Fei, who was the first to bear the brunt of the divine might, felt like a spring breeze. The divine might be terrifying to others, but to him, it was like a drizzle, not worth mentioning at all. Yang Zhon, who was guarding the Heavenless Sect Patriarch and the others on the plaza, was also unafraid of the terrifying divine might descending from the sky, because Jiu Fei was there to help him block it. Alright, I won't say so much, I'll send you 2 on your way. As Jiu Fei said this, he directly waved his hand, and an extremely sharp sword light immediately rushed out from his hand, strangling the black-robed old man opposite him. A terrifying murderous aura spread from the sword light, and everyone's ears seemed to ring with scalp-numbing screams. It was as if countless people were fighting desperately, as if they were on a battlefield of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The black-robed old man couldn't help but be shocked when he saw Jiu Fei display this sword. Looking at the sword light that was rapidly strangling him, his pupils shrank. Swish! The black-robed old man directly flew hundreds of meters away with the Wood Clan's prince, Mu Chen, avoiding the strangling sword light. However, in the next moment, a large net made of interweaving sword light appeared in front of the black-robed old man, and this large net directly covered the black-robed old man and Mu Chen. What? The black-robed old man was really shocked. How could this guy be so strong? No wonder my grandson crushed the SOS talisman I gave him. Otherwise, he would be in trouble this time. Chapter 3743. In the sky above the square in front of the Yingtian ancestral hall in the ancestral grounds of the Yingtian clan, Ji Yufei made his move. His first move was the 9 heaven punishing swords. The power of this murderous swordsmanship was terrifying. Vroom. The sound of swords rang out in the air and 9 rays of sword light instantly intertwined to form a sword net, enveloping an area of the sky. Naturally, it also trapped the black-robed elder and Mu Chen within it. The black-robed elder, Mu Xiaotian, was an important figure in the Wood clan. His cultivation was infinitely close to the extreme grade and he held an important position in the Wood clan. Mu Xiaotian's grandson, Mu Chen, was one of the 9 great princes of the Wood clan. He was qualified to compete with the other 8 great princes of the Wood clan for the position of Great Emperor. The Wood Emperor was the highest title in the Wood clan. Those who could become the Wood Emperor would be the next clan leader of the Wood clan. As such, the battle between the 9 great princes was much more intense than everyone had imagined. At this moment, Mu Xiaotian watched as the sword net enveloped him. A large bell immediately appeared on his body and enveloped him and Mu Chen. Clang! A terrifying sound wave spread out from the bell, and the void around the bell rippled like water. The net of swords that enveloped it also collapsed in the void. Kill! Mu Xiaotian roared angrily and the air shook. The divine bell on his body immediately let out a murderous sound. Ji Yufei only felt a buzzing sound in his ears and his vision darkened. He was almost knocked out by this soul-shattering murderous sound, which shocked him greatly. With his current level of cultivation, this cultivator from the Wood clan was actually able to hurt him. This made it difficult for him to be a supreme being. In the instant that Ji Yufei was distracted, Mu Xiaotian's fist had already smashed into his abdomen. In the next moment, Ji Yufei was sent flying. However, just as Ji Yufei was about to be sent flying by Mu Xiaotian's punch, Ji Yufei stretched out his right hand and grabbed Mu Xiaotian's fist. In the next moment, Mu Xiaotian felt the world spin around him. He was actually sent flying by Ji Yufei. 1 sword 9 kills. Ji Yufei brought his right index and middle hand together. Using his fingers as a sword, he pointed them out. 9 extremely sharp immortal sword lights shot out from his fingers and pierced through Mu Xiaotian's body in an instant. Mu Xiaotian screamed and fell from the sky. Grandpa! When Mu Chen saw this scene, he was extremely shocked. His grandfather was an almost invincible existence. How could he lose to this guy? At this moment, Mu Xiaotian was standing on the ground. The 9 bloody holes on his body were oozing blood continuously. He lowered his head and looked at the bloody holes on his body in disbelief. How is this possible? The light in Mu Xiaotian's eyes rapidly vanished. In the next moment, 9 beams of light erupted from his body. His entire body was reduced to a bloody mist by the 9 beams of light. Even his soul dissipated in space. Seeing this scene, Mu Chen was directly stunned. He couldn't believe that his grandfather, who stood above everyone else, who was like a supreme god, would die in the Yingtian ancestral land. This, on the square, the 4 quasi-supremes who saw this scene were all dumbfounded by Ji Yufei's lightning-fast methods. This guy didn't have any scruples at all. He even killed a big shot from the Mu clan. He simply didn't put the Mu clan in his eyes. Just how powerful must he be to dare to look down on a giant like the Mu clan? This was simply unimaginable to the founding ancestors like Ying Tian. One must know that in the entire ancestral realm, those who dared to challenge the Mu clan were definitely not insignificant. They were all ruthless characters whose names shook the entire ancestral realm. However, the Mu clan still existed. Those who dared to challenge the Mu clan had vanished without a trace. Some were killed by the Mu clan's experts, while others fled in defeat. However, very few survived. Those supremes from the Mu clan were not to be trifled with. Don't tell me he can contend against an extreme-grade sovereign? Someone said disdainfully. At this moment, Ji Yufei pointed his finger forward. Before Mu Chen could react, his forehead was pierced, and his soul was destroyed. Mu Chen breathed his last. Killing Mu Chen was as easy as blowing off dust for Ji Yufei. There was no suspense in what happened next. Ji Yufei directly wiped out Ying Tian and the others. Not only did he subdue Ying Tian, But he also controlled the 10 Absolute Palace, the Azure Cloud Path, and the Wutian sect. Ying Tian, the 10 Absolute Palace Master, the Azure Cloud Path Master, and the Wutian sect ancestor all became Ji Yufei's servants. They had no choice but to submit, because they would die if they didn't. Ji Yufei dared to kill even Mu Xiaotian and Mu Chen of the Mu clan. What else did he not dare to do? Ying Tian and the others had lived for countless years. When faced with the threat of death, they had no choice but to lower their arrogant heads. At this time, the elders who had come with Ji Yufei to the Ying Tian ancestral land were extremely excited. They had never imagined such an ending. Yang Zhon was not a true peerless expert. The true peerless expert was actually the seemingly ordinary Ji Yufei. Those fellows from the 36th monastery had all misjudged him. Now, they had become the masters of the Ying Tian sect. This was absolutely reaching the heavens in a single step. Next, Ji Yufei sealed off the entire Ying Tian ancestral land and began a great purge. As long as it was someone from the Mu clan, they would all be killed. In the cultivation world, being kind to others was being cruel to oneself. This was even after Ji Yufei had ordered Ying Tian and the other 3 quasi-sovereigns to deal with the Mu clan's disciples in the ancestral land. This way, the hands of Ying Tian and the others would be stained with the blood of the Mu clan's disciples. They could no longer turn back. After dealing with the Mu clan's disciples in the ancestral land, it was the turn of the cultivators outside the Ying Tian sect. These people had a small portion of their memories wiped and were then thrown out of the Ying Tian ancestral land. In less than half a day, the Ying Tian ancestral land was completely taken over by Ji Yufei. The Ying Tian ancestral land was still the same Ying Tian ancestral land. There was no difference. The only difference was that this place had a new master. Soon, the Mu clan began to move. Meanwhile, Ji Yufei was digging a huge pit. He wanted to trap those extreme sovereigns of the Mu clan. In the Mu clan's ancestral land, someone discovered that Mu Xiaotian's life tablet had shattered. One of the 9 emperors, Mu Chen, had also died. This shocked the entire Mu clan. Everyone was guessing who dared to attack the Mu clan. The competition of the 36th monastery of the Ying Tian sect also continued as if nothing had happened. The cultivators in the Ying Tian ancestral land were also erased by Ji Yufei using a great technique. In this way, no one knew anything about him. In the evening, several elders of the Mu clan arrived at the Ying Tian ancestral land. The Ying Tian ancestor personally came out to welcome the 3 elders and led them into the ancestral mountain in the Ying Tian ancestral land. There was a cave abode on the Ying Tian ancestral mountain. Inside the cave abode, the 3 elders of the Mu clan sat high up, while the Ying Tian ancestor and the others sat below. The status of the Ying Tian ancestor was even lower than the ordinary elders of the Mu clan. Ying Tian, what happened? Someone saw Mu Xiaotian appear in the Ying Tian ancestral land. How do you explain this? An elder of the Mu clan sitting in the seat of honor glanced at the Ying Tian ancestor and said, "Explain what?" The Ying Tian ancestor said indifferently under the gaze of the 3 elders of the Mu clan. "Mu Xiaotian is dead. Prince Mu Chen is also dead. Don't tell us you don't know." Another elder of the Mu clan said sternly. Since that person dared to kill the prince of the Mu clan, it meant that he was the enemy of the entire Mu clan. The identity of the prince of the Mu clan was very special in the Mu clan. He was even more valued than the ordinary elders because it was related to the inheritance of the clan. Any cultivation force would view their own inheritance as more important than anything else. "I know, they died at my place." The Ying Tian ancestor looked coldly at the 3 elders of the Mu clan sitting high up and suddenly said disdainfully, "What?" When the 3 elders of the Wood clan heard this, they immediately stood up and stared at ancestor Ying Tian. "Mu Hong, since you're here, there's no need for you to leave." The Ying Tian ancestor slowly stood up and looked coldly at the leading elder of the Mu clan. This elder's name was Mu Hong and his cultivation base was extremely powerful. "Ying Tian, did you kill them?" "That's impossible. With your cultivation base, there's no way you could have killed Mu Xiaotian." Elder Mu Hong stared at the Ying Tian ancestor and said coldly. At this time, 3 figures walked out from the back of the cave abode. Mu Hong and the others were shocked when they saw the three of them. "You guys want to rebel?" The expressions of Mu Hong and the others changed. The three people who walked out from the back of the cave abode were Palace Master Shi Ju, the Qingyun Pathmaster, and the Wutian sect ancestor. The Ying Tian ancestor alone would definitely not be able to kill Mu Xiaotian. However, it would be a different story if the three of them were included. All three of them were quasi-supremes. "So what if I'm rebelling?" The Ying Tian ancestor chuckled disdainfully. "You're courting death." Mu Hong roared and stretched out his right hand, grabbing at the Ying Tian ancestor. The moment he grabbed, the Ying Tian ancestor and the others also moved. Boom! With a loud bang, the entire cave abode exploded. Even the Ying Tian ancestral mountain was shaking. 7 extremely powerful silhouettes soared into the sky and rapidly moved about in the void. They continuously attacked, terrifying fluctuations of quasi-supreme level energy spread out in all directions. The 7 experts were too powerful. They destroyed the cave abode that the Ying Tian ancestor had opened on the ancestral mountain with a single attack. What happened? They're fighting again. The cultivators in the Ying Tian ancestral ground were all shocked. High up in the sky, Ji Yufei held the mountain and river cauldron in his hand and watched the battle in the sky. Soon, the 3 elders of the Mu clan used their quasi-supremes Dao weapons. Even so, they were still at a disadvantage and could not change anything. Chapter 3744. The 3 elders of the Wood clan came to the ancestral land of Ying Tian clan to investigate the cause of death of Mu Xiaotian and Mu Chen. Mu Xiaotian and Mu Chen were not so easily killed. However, Ancestor Ying Tian politely invited the 3 elders into the cave residence at the peak of Ying Tian ancestral mountain and immediately started his attack. This was a trap that Ji Yufei had dug. He wanted the experts of the Wood clan to jump into the trap themselves. If one came, one would fall. If a pair came, then a pair would fall. The 3 elders of the Wood clan fell into the trap. The cave residence at the peak of Ying Tian ancestral mountain was directly turned into dust by the quasi-supreme power that erupted from the cave residence. Boom! The entire Ying Tian ancestral land shook with a loud noise. All the cultivators in the ancestral land were alarmed and looked in the direction of the ancestral mountain in horror. What happened? The cultivators in the Ying Tian ancestral land felt the mighty quasi-supreme power, which was not something that ordinary cultivators could withstand. At this time, the great formation of the Ying Tian ancestral land was activated. The quasi-supreme power that erupted from the ancestral mountain was directly suppressed by the power of the great formation. All the cultivators in the ancestral land breathed a sigh of relief. A quasi-supreme was an existence that could do whatever they wanted even in the ancestral realm. However, the ancestral realm was too big, and it was the source of the myriad worlds. The territory of Ying Tian sect was more than 1 billion miles wide, which was already the size of any of the 5 divine realms in the ancestral god realm. This was only the territory of Ying Tian sect. Compared to Ying Tian sect, the territory controlled by the Wood clan was much larger. It should be known that whether it was Ying Tian sect, 10 Absolute Palace, Qingyun Path, or Skyless sect, they were all forces under the command of the Wood clan. The territories of these 3 forces were not smaller than Ying Tian sects. Rumble, at this moment, 7 extremely powerful figures were moving rapidly in the sky above Ying Tian ancestral mountain, fighting with all their might. Terrifying power spread out in all directions. The entire Ying Tian ancestral land's grand formation was shaking. Endless immortal light fell from the sky, and powerful immortal energy sealed the surroundings, blocking the mighty quasi-supreme being's power. At this time, the entire Ying Tian ancestral land was faintly discernible with immortal runes. The grand formation gathered the power of the immortal Tao to suppress the vast and mighty power of the quasi-supreme level. Otherwise, the entire Ying Tian ancestral land would have been directly destroyed. All the cultivators in the ancestral sky ground felt a great pressure descend from the sky. Those below the level of saints found it difficult to soar into the sky and fly. Only the saint-level experts above the saint level could barely fly up to the sky to watch the battle. This shocked the cultivators in the Ying Tian ancestral ground. Boom! Just then, a loud boom rang out. Patriarch Ying Tian and Elder Mu Hong of the Wood Clan had exchanged a palm strike. Both of them were sent flying backwards at the same time. At the same time, a purplish-green dragon burst out from Mu Hong's body. The dragon let out a long roar and pounced at Ying Tian with its claws and fangs bared. "Huh!" Ji Yufei couldn't help but feel surprised when he saw this scene from afar. This elder of the Wood Clan actually had something like this on him. That purplish-green dragon was actually a dragon soul. To be precise, it was the dragon soul of a wood dragon. Wood dragons were one of the 5 elemental true dragons. The life force exuding from the dragon soul was too vigorous. Even the withered flowers and trees could be revitalized. Boom! Patriarch Ying Tian was directly knocked away by the dragon soul. Although the soul of a wood dragon was full of life force, this kind of wood elemental power could also kill. Moreover, it was extremely powerful. This dragon soul was definitely an existence of the quasi-supreme level. How did this elder of the Wood Clan, Mu Hong, obtain this wood dragon's soul? Elder Mu Hong definitely didn't have the ability to subdue this wood dragon, let alone extract its soul and refine it into an incomparably powerful killing weapon. This is good stuff. Ji Yufei's eyes lit up when he saw the dragon dancing in the sky. Roar! At this time, Patriarch Ying Tian, who was knocked away by the wood dragon's soul, roared. A sword shadow rushed out from his body and turned into a chaotic divine sword, slashing at the wood dragon's soul. However, the incomparably sharp chaotic sword light directly slashed through the wood dragon spirit, but it could not hurt the wood dragon spirit at all. What? Patriarch Ying Tian was shocked. How was this possible? Even if it was a soul, if it was hit by his chaotic sword light, it would still be destroyed. The wood dragon's soul existed in between reality and illusion. It could condense and disperse, possessing great power. Patriarch Ying Tian was knocked away by the wood dragon's soul again. This made him feel very sullen. Although this Mu Hong was an elder of the Wood Clan, his cultivation was far from his. This Mu Hong's cultivation was only at the low-level quasi-supreme level, while Patriarch Ying Tian was the founding ancestor of the Ying Tian clan. He was at the mid-level quasi-supreme level, but he couldn't handle this Mu Hong. Kill! At this time, the Green Cloud Pathmaster roared and displayed the Green Cloud Path's killer move. Endless clouds rose from the sky, and the Green Cloud Pathmaster hid in the clouds. Green Cloud, do you really want to rebel? The one fighting with the Green Cloud Pathmaster was the elder of the Wood Clan, Mu Lin. This Mu Lin exuded a cold and gloomy aura. His entire person was like an evil spirit, causing people's hearts to palpitate. What this fellow cultivated was an evil technique. In the primogenitor's realm, various cultivation systems existed at the same time. There were also people in the major forces who cultivated all kinds of evil techniques. These people only wanted to become experts. Moreover, the major forces didn't forbid their disciples from cultivating evil techniques. Haha, so what if I'm rebelling? The Green Cloud Pathmaster's voice sounded from all directions, and no one could sense his exact location. At this time, even if the Green Cloud Pathmaster didn't want to rebel, he had no choice but to do so. This was because Ji Yufei had planted a forbidden technique on him. His life or death was at the mercy of Ji Yufei. How dare you betray my Mu clan? Aren't you afraid of being annihilated by my clan? Mu Lin said in an eerie voice. An endless amount of black gas erupted from his body. In the next moment, his figure disappeared into the black gas and disappeared without a trace. Ghost Dao divine ability. When the Green Cloud Pathmaster saw this, he couldn't help but be shocked. Mu Lin actually cultivated the Ghost Dao divine ability, which made him feel slightly uneasy. This kind of technique divine ability was the most mysterious and unpredictable, and it was the Ghost Sect's special ability. Could the Wood Clan have formed an alliance with the Ghost Sect? The Ghost Sect was a major sect in the primogenitor's realm. It was extremely powerful, and it could go against the Wood Clan and other first-rate forces. The Ghost Sect had an invincible Ghost Dao sovereign. Found you. Just when the Green Cloud Pathmaster was shocked, Mu Lin's eerie voice sounded, and a strange sound that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods came from the black aura. Chapter 3745. A battle between quasi-supremes broke out. Elder Mu Lin of the Wood Clan unleashed a Ghost Dao ability to fight against the Qingyun Pathmaster. The Qingyun Pathmaster unleashed a cloud qi that shrouded an area while he hid within it, posing a great threat to Mu Lin. However, Mu Lin was an elder of the Wood Clan after all, and his Ghost Dao ability was unfathomable. As soon as he unleashed his Ghost Dao ability, he immediately found the Qingyun Pathmaster who was hiding within the cloud qi and pounced at him. Kill. The green cloud Pathmaster let out a furious roar. The clouds around him immediately turned into countless blades and swords, and they slashed at Mu Lin who was charging at him from all directions. Although they were only formed from the cloud qi, the power of these blades was definitely not any weaker than a true divine weapon. In fact, they might even be stronger. Hee. Mu Lin, who was hidden in the ghostly qi, laughed. Countless figures appeared in the ghostly qi. These figures were densely packed, like an army of ghostly shadows. They pounced towards the Pathlord, completely ignoring the swords and sabers condensed from the ghostly qi. These ghostly figures could switch between being illusory and real. When the green cloud Pathmaster's cloud qi condensed countless sabers and swords, these ghostly figures were like nothingness. The sabers and swords directly slashed through their bodies, unable to hurt these ghostly figures at all. What? The Qingyun Pathmaster was shocked. Mu Lin's Ghost Dao ability was indeed impressive, but he was a quasi-supremes after all, so he did not panic. He did not attack immediately. Instead, he waited until the ghosts were right in front of him before he opened his mouth and spat out a divine orb. As soon as the divine orb appeared, astral winds immediately raged in the surroundings. The astral winds that came from the divine orb blew away the ghosts that were charging at him, as if they were blowing away black smoke. The astral winds that erupted from the divine orb were extremely powerful. Not only did they blow away the ghosts, but they also blew away the black smoke around Mu Lin. Mu Lin's real body was directly exposed in the void. Divine wind orb. Mu Lin was taken aback. In the next moment, his quasi-supreme ghostly body was sliced into countless pieces by the invisible gale, and then shattered into pieces in the void. However, those fragments turned into black gas in the void. Streams of black gas gathered together and a black shadow appeared in the middle of the black gas. Soon, Mu Lin's ghostly body reformed and reappeared in the air. Powerful ghostly powers burst from his body, terrifying to the heavens. Immortal ghost body? The green cloud Pathmaster was shocked. He stared at Mu Lin, who was shrouded in ghostly aura, with a grave expression. Hey, you have quite the discerning eye. Since you know that I have cultivated out the undying ghost body, why don't you just surrender? Mu Lin said with a sneer. Preposterous. The green cloud Pathmaster was both shocked and furious, but he really couldn't think of a way to break Mu Lin's immortal ghost body. Buzz. The wind god pearl hovering above green cloud Pathmaster's head was vibrating. Formless astral winds swirled around green cloud Pathmaster's body, causing the surrounding void to distort. The two experts were facing each other. At this moment, the Heavenless Sect Master and the 10 Absolutes Palace Master worked together and forced the other elder of the Wood Clan into a desperate situation. Boom! The 10 Absolutes' divine weapons danced and knocked away the Wood Clan elder Mu Heng's heaven-transforming cauldron. The Heavenless Sect Master's heavenless blade instantly descended from the sky and killed Mu Heng. However, Mu Heng was a quasi-supreme. Naturally, he wouldn't die so easily. In the next moment, Mu Heng's head exploded and turned into a blood mist. Whoosh! A beam of divine light soared into the sky, trying to escape. There was a vague figure in the divine light. Still trying to escape? The Heavenless Sect Master soared into the sky and stretched out his hand. The divine light that soared into the sky flew towards him and was caught by him. The divine light turned into a clump of divine light in the Heavenless Sect Master's hand. There was a small person in the clump of divine light, trying to rush out. It was Mu Heng's primordial spirit. You can't kill me, the wood elemental primordial spirit said in horror. He didn't want to die. He couldn't die. He still had many things to do. His descendants had not matured yet. If he died, his bloodline would decline completely. You think I can't kill you just because you say so? The heavenless sect master looked at the figure in the clump of divine light in disdain. Then, he clenched his hand and the clump of divine light in his hand exploded. Mu Heng's primordial spirit dissipated in the divine light. This time, he was really dead. At this moment, Mu Heng's heaven-transforming cauldron turned into a beam of divine light and soared into the sky. It broke the seal of the heaven-reigning formation and was about to disappear. Oh no! When the heavenless sect master saw the situation, he couldn't help but jump. He quickly soared into the sky, trying to collect the heaven-transforming cauldron. However, it seemed like it was already too late. Just as the heaven-transforming cauldron was about to fly away, a huge hand stretched out from the side and grabbed it. The heavenless sect master wanted to curse out loud. However, when he saw the person who took the heaven-transforming cauldron, he immediately swallowed all the words he was about to say. Mars, Master, the heavenless sect master's voice trembled. He quickly prostrated himself in the air, trembling in fear. Help those two fellows and kill the people from the wood race. Jiu Fei didn't even look at the heavenless sect master. Then, he disappeared into the air, vanishing without a trace. Yes, Master. The heavenless sect master quickly accepted the order and stood up. He roared furiously and charged at Mu Heng, who was fighting with the heavenless sect master. A heavenless blade descended from the sky and slashed at Mu Heng. Everywhere the heavenless blade passed, a pitch-black spatial tear was left in the air. What? Mu Heng was startled and quickly dodged. The heavenless sect master roared furiously and attacked with all his might. Finally, he managed to knock the wood dragon spirit away. At this moment, although Mu Heng's movements were fast, he was still struck in the left shoulder by the heavenless blade that descended from the sky. With a shrill cry, Mu Heng's entire left arm was severed at the shoulder and sent flying. Go! Mu Heng turned pale with fright. He immediately merged with the wood dragon spirit and turned into a wood dragon. He soared into the sky and broke through the layers of seals, charging out of the heaven-reigning formation in an instant. However, as soon as he stuck his head out, a streak of light immediately slashed over, directly splitting Mu Heng into two. Even his soul did not manage to escape, dying on the spot. This. Chapter 3746. The three elders of the wood race were surrounded by ancestor Ying Tian and the others. The leading elder, Mu Heng, and another elder, Mu Heng, were killed one after another. This frightened the last elder of the wood race, Mu Lin, out of his wits. He quickly turned around and fled. Do you think you can still escape? Ancestor Ying Tian sneered and raised his right hand. A layer of sky curtain immediately appeared in the sky and shrouded Mu Lin, who was soaring into the sky. Extremely terrifying power of the immortal Tao descended from the sky, sealing off a part of the space. This was the power of the heavenly great formation. Ancestor Ying Tian activated the power of the heavenly great formation with a raise of his hand and sealed all of Mu Lin's escape routes. Mu Lin was an elder of the wood race. Normally, he was high and mighty. Even quasi-supremes like Ancestor Ying Tian would not look him in the eye. The elders of the wood race all had a sense of superiority over the other races. In their opinion, although Ancestor Ying Tian and the others were strong, they were still slaves of the wood race. Ancestor Ying Tian and the others naturally knew their status. They were just cannon fodder of the wood race. Every time the wood race fought with the other races, they would be at the forefront. Normally, Ancestor Ying Tian and the others would not dare to resist. However, it was different now. They would definitely not let go of any opportunity to kill the elders of the wood race. Shua. Ancestor Wu Tian's heavenless blade flashed through the air. The elder of the wood race, Mu Lin, screamed miserably. He was actually cut in half by the heavenless blade. Mu Lin's upper body still soared into the sky. He cultivated the supreme secret technique of the ghost sect, the undying ghost body. Even if he was cut by the heavenless blade, he would not suffer any fatal injuries. Boom! With a loud bang, the upper half of Mu Lin's body exploded. A mass of black gas instantly erupted and spread in all directions. Within the black gas, ghostly shadows flickered. It was as if the gates of hell had been opened and countless evil spirits were released from it. Within the black smoke, countless black shadows rushed out in all directions. That was Mu Lin's secret art of the ghost sect, which allowed him to create thousands of ghost clones. As long as he could escape from one of the clones, he would be able to survive and cultivate the immortal ghost body again. However, in order to kill the Wood tribe, ancestor Yingtian had made preparations beforehand. He was also aware that Mu Lin had cultivated a secret art of the ghost sect. Ancestor Yingtian naturally would not let Mu Lin go so easily. The sky canopy descended from the sky and enveloped all the ghostly shadows and black qi, sucking them into the sky canopy. Yingtian, just you wait. My ancestor will definitely avenge us. Mu Lin's voice came from the sky, his voice stern. However, the Yingtian great ancestor was not frightened by Mu Lin's words. He immediately activated the Yingtian great formation, and Mu Lin, who was enveloped by the sky curtain, was immediately enveloped by a ball of true fire. Mu Lin only managed to let out half a scream before he was burned to ashes by the immortal fire that emerged from the sky. Apart from ashes, nothing was left. An elder of the Wood tribe had suffered such a tragic fate, and both his body and soul had been destroyed. Mu Lin was dead, but the Yingtian great ancestor and the others could not feel happy. Because killing the 3 great elders of the Wood tribe meant that they had completely betrayed the Wood tribe. No one knew better than them how powerful the Wood tribe was. After all, it was not a matter of 1 or 2,000 years, but a very long time. The Wood tribe had 2 extreme grade supremes, and their inheritance was endless. On the other hand, forces like the Yingtian sect and the 10 Absolute Palace only had a short history of tens of thousands of years. Compared to the Wood tribe, they were simply vulnerable. But now, they were going to betray the Wood tribe and become enemies with the Wood tribe. The Yingtian great ancestor and the others did not know about Ji Yufei's origin, but at this time, they hoped that Ji Yufei was strong enough to compete with the extreme grade supremes of the Wood tribe. But was this possible? The Yingtian great ancestor and the others had already seen that Ji Yufei was not an extreme grade supremes. In this case, if the 2 great ancestors of the Wood tribe personally came, wouldn't Ji Yufei be out of luck? Their hands were stained with the blood of the elders of the Wood tribe. If Ji Yufei was out of luck, they would also be out of luck. The Yingtian great ancestor's expression was very solemn. He knew that they could no longer turn back. However, Ji Yufei did not pay attention to the Yingtian great ancestor and the others. Instead, he directly returned to the Yingtian ancestor hall. After entering the ancestor hall and sitting on the throne in the middle of the hall, he carefully observed the ancient cauldron in his hand. Quasi-supreme Tao artifact, containing endless vitality. Heaven transformation cauldron? Ji Yufei released a strand of his divine consciousness into the ancient cauldron in his hand. In the next moment, he knew the origin of this ancient cauldron. Heaven transformation cauldron. What a domineering name. This Heaven transformation cauldron had an imprint left behind by its master. As long as this imprint was not erased, the master of this Heaven transformation cauldron could directly take it back. However, this Heaven transformation cauldron fell into the hands of Ji Yufei. With one look, he could see through this Tao artifact. Ji Yufei directly made a move to erase the imprint in the Heaven transformation cauldron. The instant Ji Yufei erased the imprint, a middle-aged man who had been sitting cross-legged in a cave in the depths of the Wood tribe's ancestral lands suddenly opened his eyes. The instant the middle-aged man opened his eyes, it was like 2 bolts of lightning flashed in the cave. A horrifying aura immediately spread out from his body. Countless Tao patterns appeared on the walls of the cave abode. Mu Heng is dead, the middle-aged man said. His voice was incomparably old, which did not match his appearance. At the same time, a few strong spiritual senses rushed out of the Wood tribe's ancestral lands. These spiritual senses instantly enveloped the cave where the middle-aged man was. The experts of the Wood tribe communicated with their spiritual senses. Naturally, the others did not know what they were talking about. At this moment, in the Yingtian ancestral lands, Ji Yufei entered his inner world and returned to the valley. He gave the Heaven transformation cauldron to Yang Er. This Heaven transformation cauldron still had the soul of a wood dragon hidden in it. If Yang Er could refine this Tao artifact, her cultivation and combat prowess would definitely soar. After that, Ji Fei left the valley and reappeared in the Great Hall. At this moment, old ancestor Ying Tian and the others were already standing in the Great Hall with their hands by their sides. It looked like they had been waiting for a long time. However, they were very careful. They did not dare to show any dissatisfaction or impatience. It had to be known that their life and death depended on a single thought from Ji Fei. "Greetings, Master." When old ancestor Ying Tian and the others saw Ji Fei appear, they immediately knelt on the ground. "Get up." Ji Fei waved his hand and sat down. "Yes, Master." Old ancestor Ying Tian and the others hurriedly stood up. "Speak." Ji Fei did not want to talk nonsense with these guys. "Master, what should we do next?" Palace Master Shijue asked carefully. "What should we do next?" Ji Fei touched his chin and pondered for a while before saying, "Ying Tian, spread the news that you will undergo tribulation in 3 days to break through to the extreme grade realm." What? When old ancestor Ying Tian heard this, he was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. Wasn't this courting death? Breaking through to the extreme grade supremacy realm? This would attract the extreme grade supremacy realm. At that time, those extreme grade supremacy realm could wipe Ying Tian's sect from the ancestral realm with a slap. "Master, you want brother Ying Tian to undergo tribulation?" Sect Master Wu Tian glanced at old ancestor Ying Tian and said in shock. Everyone looked at Ji Fei. "It's not a real tribulation. I just want to spread the news that I want to attract the Wood tribe's extreme grade supremacy realm," Ji Fei said nonchalantly. This, old ancestor Ying Tian and the others were dumbfounded. What was the master doing? He actually wanted to attract the Wood tribe's extreme grade supremacy realm. Wasn't this courting death? "All right, that's it. Step down," Ji Fei said impatiently with a wave of his hand. "Yes. This lowly one will take his leave." Old ancestor Ying Tian and the others hurriedly bowed to Ji Fei and then retreated from the hall step by step. "It's time to undergo tribulation." Ji Fei looked up at the ceiling of the hall and muttered to himself. His cultivation had reached the peak of the quasi-supremacy realm and he had long been ready to break through to the extreme grade realm. The reason why he hadn't done so was that he wanted to be fully prepared. One had to know that once he failed to break through to the extreme grade realm, the consequences were extremely serious. His body and soul would be destroyed. This ultimate leap was too difficult, which was why Ji Fei hadn't dared to break through to the extreme grade realm. He wanted to make it foolproof. Ji Fei was digging a hole that could kill an extreme grade supremacy. Patriarch Ying Tian had actually been in seclusion for 1,800 years in order to break through to the extreme grade. He had only come out of seclusion in the past few years. Ji Fei wanted old ancestor Ying Tian to spread the news in order to attract the Wood race's extreme grade supremacy. The Wood clan had 2 extreme grade supremes and 2 progenitors. There was no way the Wood clan's extreme grade supremes wouldn't have sensed old ancestor Ying Tian's breakthrough to the extreme grade realm. If 1 came, he would kill 1. If 2 came, he would kill a pair. Very soon, an explosive piece of news spread through the territories ruled by the Wood tribe. Even forces outside of the Wood tribe received the news. Is it true that Patriarch Ying Tian will undergo his tribulation in 3 days? It's been a long time since someone from the ancestral realm tried to break through to the extreme grade. Yes, the last time was 5,000 years ago. The cultivation world of the ancestral realm was in an uproar. Everyone was discussing old ancestor Ying Tian's tribulation. The Wood race naturally received the news immediately. But what was strange was that they didn't make things difficult for old ancestor Ying Tian. The 3 Wood race elders died in Ying Tian's ancestral land, which made the Wood race furious. Now, there was news that old ancestor Ying Tian was going to undergo his tribulation. This was no small matter. No one knew what the higher-ups of the Wood race were thinking. However, Ji Fei knew that the Wood clan was only enduring for the time being. They would definitely not let the 3 elders die in vain. Ji Fei was going to undergo his tribulation in 3 days. Success or failure depended on this. Whether he could replace the Wood race or not would depend on what happened in 3 days. Chapter 3747. Ancestor Ying Tian would undergo the extreme supreme tribulation in 3 days. As soon as the news came out, the entire territory controlled by the Wood clan boiled over. Soon, a large number of cultivators arrived outside the ancestral ground. They were all cultivators who lived near the ancestral ground. After receiving the news, many cultivators directly came to the ancestral ground through the teleportation formation. For a moment, the outside of the ancestral ground was very lively. 800 miles away from the ancestral land of the Ying Tian sect, an ancient city was packed with people. Before the news came out, the streets of the ancient city were very deserted. After the news came out, there was a continuous stream of divine light rushing out from the teleportation formation in the city. People kept coming, and the teleportation formation never stopped. The inns, tea houses, and streets of the ancient city were all filled with people. Moreover, they were all cultivators. There were even figures of the demon clan and barbarian clan on the streets. Even some of the demons that were covered in devil chi swaggered into the Ying Tian city. I heard that ancestor Ying Tian's cultivation reached the peak of the quasi-supreme 10,000 years ago. Is he finally going to undergo the tribulation now? Ancestor Ying Tian seems to have been in seclusion for 1,800 years for this tribulation. I wonder if it's true. If he succeeds, then he will be on equal footing with the Wood clan. Countless cultivators were discussing about ancestor Ying Tian's tribulation. It had been a long time since anyone in the ancestral realm was able to make the final leap. The disciples of Ying Tian sect were naturally ecstatic. Their ancestor was undergoing the extreme supreme tribulation. If he succeeded, they might not have to be slaves of the Wood clan anymore. Being a slave was not a good feeling. A little guy from the Wood clan could bully the experts of other sects at will. This was the cruel world where the strong preyed on the weak. The Wood clan was so powerful that no one dared to provoke them. Under the Wood clan's rule, there were more than a dozen subsidiary forces like Ying Tian sect. This power was enough to make any second-rate force despair. The ancestral mountain was so huge that even the people of the ancestral realm could not imagine it. It was not a secret that there was a big secret in the ancestral realm. However, no one knew exactly what the secret was. Perhaps only the extreme-grade supreme beings were qualified to know. Ying Tian's tribulation has caused a sensation. In a tea house next to Ying Tiancheng's main street, a purple-haired young man sat by the window as he looked at the people coming and going on the street. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Master, even if Ying Tian succeeds in transcending the tribulation, he'll still be your slave. An old servant dressed in green standing behind the purple-haired young man lowered his head and said carefully, "You're right. Haha, then let's give Ying Tian a big surprise." The purple-haired youth laughed and said, "This should be a shock." The green-robed old servant echoed, "What are you two talking about? How dare you look down on our sect leader?" At this moment, a burly man at the neighboring table slammed the table and stood up, glaring at the purple-haired youth. "Hey! Isn't this fellow the eldest disciple of Ying Tian City's city lord, Tai Man?" Someone recognized the muscular man. These two fellows don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. They actually dare to criticize the sect leader of Ying Tian sect behind his back. Looks like they're in for it. Someone whispered, "I heard everything you said clearly. You want my sect master to be your slave? It's outrageous." The Iron Tower-like burly man strode towards the purple-haired youth as he spoke. He stretched out his big hand and was about to grab the purple-haired youth's shoulder. Presumptuous. The green-robed old servant standing behind the purple-haired youth just waved his hand, and Tai Man flew out, directly smashing through the wall and falling outside the tea house. All the cultivators in the tea house were stunned when they saw this. The purple-haired youth was still leisurely sipping his tea and did not look at Tai Man from beginning to end. "You wait, don't leave if you have the guts." Tai Man's voice came from outside the tea house. "Humph. A little ant dares to be presumptuous in front of my master. Master, let me deal with this guy." The green-robed old servant walked out from behind the purple-haired youth and said respectfully to the purple-haired youth, "Forget it." The purple-haired youth shook his head. "Humph. This guy is lucky." The green-robed old servant retreated. "Sir, the tea house's shopkeeper recovered from the shock and hurriedly ran over. The green-robed old servant directly took out a fist-sized crystal from his sleeve and threw it to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper hurriedly caught the crystal and looked down at it. Immediately, a smile appeared on his face, and then he retreated. That is, a supreme-grade immortal crystal. When the surrounding cultivators saw the crystal in the shopkeeper's hand, all of them were extremely jealous. That was a supreme-grade immortal crystal, and it was such a big piece. Even if the tea house was demolished, it would be enough to compensate for it. The master and servant did not leave, and they seemed to be not afraid of Tai Man's threat at all. Soon, a powerful immortal Dao aura surged out from the depths of Yingtian City. Oh no! When they sensed the mighty aura of the immortal Dao, the expressions of all the cultivators in the tea house instantly changed greatly, and they immediately fled as if there was oil on their feet. In just an instant, only the purple-haired youth and the green-robed old servant were left in the entire tea house. Even the fat tea house's shopkeeper was nowhere to be seen. The purple-haired youth still had a calm expression, but the green-robed old servant behind him frowned. Whoosh! At this moment, a ball of immortal light rushed in from outside the tea house. The immortal light dissipated, and 5 people appeared. One of them was the eldest disciple of Yingtian City's city lord, Tai Man, who had been thrown away by the green-robed old servant. The green-robed old servant saw that the leader of the 5 people was an old man with a sage-like appearance. Martial uncle, it's these 2 people who dared to criticize the sect master behind his back. Tai Man pointed at the purple-haired youth and the green-robed old servant with a face full of grief and indignation. How dare you criticize the sect master, you deserve to die. The old man said righteously, and then he waved his hand. An immortal blade immediately flew out of his sleeve, directly toward the purple-haired youth and the green-robed old servant. How dare you! The green-robed old servant walked out from behind the purple-haired youth. He reached out with his right hand and grabbed the immortal blade that was coming at him. The immortal blade struggled in his hand like a spirit snake. Seeing this, the old man could not help but be shocked. The eyes of Tai Man and the others behind the old man almost fell to the ground. Their martial uncle was a Saint King, and an existence at the peak of Saint King. He was only half a step away from becoming a Saint Emperor. The doctrine tool that their martial uncle had taken out was naturally a Saint King doctrine tool. This green-robed old servant, who looked so ordinary that he could not be more ordinary, had actually grabbed the Saint King doctrine tool with his bare hands. Didn't this mean that the body of the green-robed old servant was even stronger than the Saint King doctrine tool? You don't even know who you've provoked. The green-robed old servant sneered at the people in front of him. A powerful wave of energy erupted from his body, and the entire tea house began to shake. Chapter 3748. This is, in the tea house of Yingtian City, the junior brother and the 4 juniors of the city lord were stunned. This seemingly ordinary old servant was actually a peerless expert. How is this possible? The voice of Tai Man, the eldest disciple of the city lord, trembled. The pressure that came from the old servant made his soul tremble. Tai Man's other 3 junior brothers directly lay on the ground, trembling in extreme fear. Saint Emperor? The junior brother of the city lord, Huang Long, was shocked to the extreme. A servant was actually a Saint Emperor. Then how powerful was the master of this old servant? Thinking of this, Huang Long couldn't help but look at the purple-haired young man who was still sitting leisurely drinking tea. This time, it was really because of Tai Man that he was going to die. Huang Long's forehead was sweating. In his heart, he had already bought over 18 generations of Tai Man's ancestors. How dare you be presumptuous in front of my master? Leave your lives behind. The azure-robed old servant looked at Daoist Huang Long and said indifferently, "Fellow Daoist, is there some misunderstanding?" As Huang Long spoke, his right hand that was hidden in his sleeve had already crushed a talisman. You dare to play tricks in front of my door? Go die." As he spoke, the old servant pointed out with a finger, and a speck of starlight shot out from the tip of his finger. Puff! With a light sound, a flower of blood bloomed from between Huang Long's eyebrows. In the next moment, his entire body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Even his origin spirit couldn't escape. The speck of starlight turned, and Tai Man and the other disciples of the city lord instantly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. They didn't even have the chance to scream before they died. It was that simple. In front of a Saint Emperor, Huang Long and the others were like ants that could be instantly killed with a raise of a hand. The smell of blood filled the air, and the purple-haired young man who was drinking tea couldn't help but frown. "Let's go." The purple-haired young man put down the teacup and stood up. Boom. At this moment, there was a loud bang, and a huge golden hand slapped down from the sky. The entire tea house instantly exploded and was smashed to pieces by the golden hand. "You want to leave? Have you asked for my permission?" A furious roar came from the sky, and a figure that emitted boundless golden light descended from the sky. The entire world seemed to have transformed into a celestial realm, bathed in celestial light. Within the celestial light, celestial flowers floated down, and there seemed to be celestial music of the great path lingering in the void. Everyone there was shocked to the extreme. The cultivators in the vicinity of the tea house fled in terror. Some unlucky fellows were simply sent flying by the formidable shockwaves. "You dare to kill my people in my territory? You're simply looking for death." The newcomer stared at the ruins below and said coldly. There was a huge palm print on the ground. A cold laugh rang out and a ball of divine light slowly rose from the palm print. Within the divine light were two figures. They were the purple-haired young man and his servant. What? Yingtian City Lord was shocked. His full power attack was actually unable to kill these two fellows. Could this fellow actually be a saint venerable? How is this possible? Who the hell are you? Yingtian City Lord was shocked and angry. This time, he had really kicked an iron plate. Who exactly did his junior brother provoke? Noisy. The purple-haired young man then waved his hand, and Yingtian City Lord immediately felt as if he had been hit by an invisible divine mountain. His body instantly exploded and turned into a mist of blood. Both his body and soul were directly destroyed. It was as if he had simply swatted a fly to death. His face was indifferent. When the cultivators in the distance saw this scene, they were really shocked. Yingtian City Lord actually died just like that. For a moment, the surroundings were incomparably silent. Let's go meet old ancestor Yingtian." As the purple-haired young man spoke, he took the green-robed old servant and soared into the sky. In an instant, they disappeared into the void and disappeared without a trace, leaving behind countless dumbfounded spectators. Yingtian City Lord was dead. He was casually swatted to death by someone. When the news spread, the entire Yingtian city was in an uproar. Who the hell is that person? He actually dared to kill Yingtian City Lord. Isn't he afraid of old ancestor Yingtian? Someone said with extreme shock. The death of Yingtian City Lord had indeed alarmed many important figures, but now, the eyes of all the forces were focused on Yingtian ancestral ground. No one stood up for Yingtian City Lord. At this time, all the important figures were heading towards Yingtian ancestral ground, wanting to see old ancestor Yingtian undergo the tribulation. Just as those important figures arrived at Yingtian ancestral ground, Ji Yufei secretly left Yingtian ancestral ground with old ancestor Yingtian. The Qingyun Pathmaster and the others stayed behind. Ji Yufei had left a backup plan in Yingtian ancestral ground. It should be known that Yingtian ancestral ground was a super huge pit at this time. In the sky above Yingtian ancestral ground, there were constantly divine lights flying past. There were also people riding all kinds of divine beasts, and there were even many sword immortals flying on their swords. Powerful auras constantly descended from the sky. The ferocious birds and beasts in the mountains were all extremely frightened and carefully hid. Many experts from the Wood clan had come. At noon, countless people clustered around a chariot that descended to Yingtian ancestral ground. The chariot was incomparably gorgeous, and the entire chariot was actually refined from Yang Essence Iron. Yang Essence Iron was a divine iron that could only be found in the core of a divine sundae. Even in the ancestral realm, it was very rare. To reach the core of a divine sun, one had to at least have the cultivation of a quasi-supreme. Otherwise, one's body and soul would be burned by the yang divine fire. The divine sun of the ancestral realm was different from the divine suns of other worlds. The starry sky of the ancestral realm was infinitely vast, and countless divine suns decorated the starry sky. Every divine sun was emitting young true fire. Some divine suns were especially huge, and there were even carnate lifeforms in the core. In the ancestral realm, everything was possible. To be able to use supreme young essence iron to refine a war chariot, this could be considered to be very luxurious. Furthermore, the war chariot was also inlaid with star stones. Each of these star stones were refined from real stars. There seemed to be a starry sky around the chariot, and the entire chariot seemed to be flying in the starry sky. As for the beasts pulling the chariot, they were even more astonishing. There were actually 9 astral beasts. These astral beasts relied on devouring stars to survive. If a single astral beast appeared, the entire starfield would suffer a calamity. These wild beasts were naturally huge to be able to devour a star in one bite. But at this time, these 9 star beasts had shrunk to the size of ordinary horses. They pulled the star chariot and descended toward Yingtian Ancestral Mountain. Everyone crowded around the chariot and welcomed it into Yingtian Ancestral Mountain. Chapter 3749. A great figure from the Wood clan had arrived. This person was the son of the Wood clan's first progenitor. Whether it was status or cultivation, this progenitor's descendant was second only to the progenitor. This person's name was Mu Jinghong. His cultivation had also reached the peak of the quasi-supreme realm. This time, he came to the Ying Tian ancestral ground to observe the Ying Tian forefathers' tribulation. At this time, the Wood clan already knew that something was wrong with the Ying Tian sect. However, the Ying Tian forefather chose this time to undergo the tribulation, which messed up all of the Wood clan's arrangements. In fact, the Wood clan didn't care about the Ying Tian sect. In the eyes of the higher-ups of the Wood clan, destroying the Ying Tian sect was a piece of cake. Therefore, the higher-ups of the Wood clan planned to act after the Ying Tian forefathers' tribulation. However, when Mu Jinghong arrived at the Ying Tian ancestral ground, he found that the Ying Tian forefather was nowhere to be found. Does he dare to enter the primogenitor mountain to undergo the tribulation? At the peak of Ying Tianzu mountain, Mu Jinghong sat high above in a newly built palace hall. As he opened and closed his eyes, rays of light shot out from under his eyelids. The Ying Tian forefather actually avoided him. This made Mu Jinghong very angry. One had to know that the Ying Tian forefather wasn't even worthy of carrying his shoes, yet he dared to look down on him like this. Who gave him the courage? While Mu Jinghong was fuming, Ji Yufei and the Ying Tian forefather had already entered the primogenitor mountain range. Master, are you going to undergo the tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range? The Ying Tian forefather finally couldn't help but ask after seeing that Ji Yufei wanted to enter the depths of the primogenitor mountain range. The primogenitor mountain range was definitely not a good place to undergo the tribulation. Since ancient times, no one had been willing to enter the primogenitor mountain range to undergo the tribulation. The Ying Tian sect was just outside the primogenitor mountain range. The Ying Tian forefather paid a lot of attention to the primogenitor mountain range and had heard some legends about it. He had even experimented and sent disciples who were about to undergo the immortal god tribulation into the primogenitor mountain range. The results shocked him. Out of 100 people who underwent the immortal god tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range, not one would succeed. However, once someone succeeded, they would obtain power that was close to invincible. This was the result of undergoing the heavenly tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range. The success rate was shockingly low, but once one succeeded, they would be nearly invincible in the same realm. However, to the cultivators outside the primogenitor mountain range, entering the primogenitor mountain range to undergo the tribulation was undoubtedly courting death. However, no matter what world it was, there would always be some crazy fellows who thought highly of themselves. They believed that they would be invincible after successfully passing the tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range. However, it was good to have confidence, but it was not good to be too confident. There were very few tribulation transcenders who could walk out of the primogenitor mountain range. This place is not bad. Ji Yufei stopped outside the entrance of a valley. He was in existence at the peak of the quasi-supremacy stage and had already stepped into the extreme grade realm. He could naturally sense the difference between the primogenitor mountain range and the outside world. Since he was going to make the ultimate leap, he would do his best. If he could succeed, he would be nearly invincible among his peers. Ji Yufei had fought with the progenitor of the wood race before, so he knew how powerful and terrifying the progenitor of the wood race was. The other party was a veteran extreme grade sovereign, so if Ji Yufei wanted to compete with him, he would have to take the risk. No one could casually obtain great power. Seeing that Ji Yufei was really going to pass the tribulation, the old ancestor Ying Tian was indescribably shocked. What was wrong with his new master? He clearly knew that there was danger, but he still came here to pass the tribulation. At this moment, Ji Yufei flipped his right hand, and an ancient cauldron appeared in his hand. It was a simple and unadorned cauldron, only the size of a fist. However, it was this ancient cauldron that could not be any more ordinary, that exuded an ancient aura that seemed to have come from the prehistoric times. This made the old ancestor Ying Tian somewhat incredulous. No matter which world it was in, only immortal things could exist for eternity. This small cauldron seemed to have existed for countless years, so it was definitely not ordinary. "Old man, come out." Ji Yufei slapped the ancient cauldron. In the next moment, a cursing sound came from the ancient cauldron. "Brat, can't you let this old man have a good rest?" Following the sound of cursing, a skinny old man with messy hair like a chicken coop emerged from the small cauldron. The little old man shouted at Ji Yufei in dissatisfaction. "Hey, this is..." The disheveled old man suddenly looked around in shock. Then, he closed his eyes and sensed the void around him. "How is this possible? Brat, you actually came to the ancestral world?" The disheveled old man opened his eyes abruptly and stared at Ji Yufei in disbelief. Ji Yufei smiled and said indifferently, "What's so difficult about that?" At this moment, the old ancestor Ying Tian looked at the disheveled old man on the ancient cauldron in Ji Yufei's hand. His eyeballs were about to fall to the ground. Wasn't this the legendary god that was born from an extreme Tao treasure? Ordinary sacred treasures might have an artifact soul, but a god was different. It was the ultimate transformation of an artifact soul. It was a different kind of life existence. A god was a life form, but an artifact soul was not. This was the fundamental difference between an extreme Tao treasure and an ordinary Tao treasure. It could speak, communicate with its master, and have an independent spiritual consciousness. Only the god of an extreme Tao treasure could do this. An extreme Tao treasure was simply a different kind of supreme being. At this moment, the old ancestor Ying Tian finally understood why Ji Yufei wasn't afraid of the wood race. He actually had an extreme Tao treasure. The old ancestor Ying Tian looked at Ji Yufei with awe. "Stop showing off in front of me. Tell me, how did you come here?" The disheveled old man looked at Ji Yufei with disdain. Ji Yufei then told him how he came to the ancestral world. "Brat, you're really bold." The disheveled old man couldn't help but shake his head. This guy really knew how to cause trouble. He had just conquered the ancestral god world, and now he came to the ancestral world to harm the living beings there. The ancestral world wasn't something an ordinary world could compare to. This was the source of all worlds. Without the power of heaven's punishment, supreme beings could do whatever they wanted. If Ji Yufei entered the ancestral world now and was targeted by a supreme being, he would definitely die. Even with the protection of the mountain and river cauldron, it wouldn't work. A true supreme being was much more powerful than an extreme Tao treasure. "Alright, what do you think of me undergoing the tribulation here?" Ji Yufei said to the disheveled old man impatiently. "Undergoing the tribulation here?" The disheveled old man carefully sensed this world. Soon, he put away his frivolous expression and turned extremely solemn. "Are you sure you want to undergo the tribulation here?" The disheveled old man stared at Ji Yufei seriously. At this moment, he was no longer joking around. This concerned Ji Yufei's life and death. The ultimate leap was not an easy task. This was many times more difficult than any of the heavenly tribulations that Ji Yufei had undergone previously. If the ultimate leap was easy to achieve, there wouldn't be so few supreme beings in the world. Throughout the ages, there weren't many supreme beings that were born. Even if some worlds had flawless laws of heaven and earth, they might not be able to give birth to supreme beings. Why? Not here. Ji Yufei stared at the disheveled old man with a solemn expression. Chapter 3750. Ji Yufei brought Patriarch Yingtian into the Primogenitor mountain range. They headed deeper into the Primogenitor mountain range and didn't encounter many powerful beasts along the way. This surprised Ji Yufei. One must know that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the Primogenitor mountain range was much denser than other regions. Cultivating here would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort. However, those cultivators were afraid of being contaminated by the Primogenitor Qi in the Primogenitor mountain range. Any cultivator who cultivated in the Primogenitor mountain range would face a much stronger heaven's tribulation when they were about to undergo it. It was a heaven's tribulation that could make the cultivator despair. Most cultivators who entered the Primogenitor mountain range to cultivate would end up with their bodies and souls destroyed. As time went by, no one dared to enter the Primogenitor mountain range to cultivate. When Ji Yufei arrived in front of a valley, Ji Yufei stopped and didn't head deeper into the Primogenitor mountain range. This place was not bad. The valley was surrounded by mountains and the entire valley was like an upside-down bowl. This valley was a spiritual land that gathered the spiritual energy of the surrounding mountains. Since Ji Yufei was going to undergo the heavenly tribulation, he naturally had to be prepared. He directly summoned the god's will of the mountain and river cauldron. This caused old ancestor Yingtian, who was watching from the side, to be so scared that his legs turned to jelly. That was a god from the legends. The disheveled old man was a super antique that had existed for countless years. He rushed up into the sky and observed the surrounding terrain seriously, sensing the Tao runes of this part of the world. Soon, he flew down from the sky and landed on the ancient cauldron in Ji Yufei's hand. He sat there, swinging his legs and looking up into the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. Ji Yufei didn't disturb the disheveled old man. Since his master didn't say anything, Patriarch Yingtian was naturally even more careful and didn't dare to let out a fart. Although the disheveled old man was only the size of a finger, Patriarch Yingtian knew that he could kill him with one finger. The disheveled old man stared at the sky for a long time. After he retracted his gaze, the 5 fingers on his right hand kept pinching as if he was a fortune teller. Ji Yufei was amused by the disheveled old man's behavior. "Brat, I think you should just forget about it. Don't undergo your tribulation here." The disheveled old man shook his head and said to Ji Yufei. Ji Yufei looked at the disheveled old man suspiciously. The disheveled old man scratched his messy hair in embarrassment. "This place is very special and it's not suitable for tribulation transcendence. Even if we were to use everything we have and protect you, there's only a 40% chance of success." "That low?" Ji Yufei said in surprise. At this moment, when Patriarch Yingtian heard the words of the disheveled old man, he was already shocked to the extreme, suspecting that he had heard wrongly. A 40% chance was way too high. That was 40%. In other words, in theory, 4 out of 10 people would succeed. This was many times higher than the success rate he had obtained from the test. Master actually has a 40% chance of success. Forefather Yingtian found it hard to believe. It can't be helped. I don't understand it either. There are so many auras of the extreme Tao in this place. If you were to return to the ancestral god world or the human world, there's still a 90% chance of success. The disheveled old man pondered for a moment and said, "Neither the human world nor the ancestral god world is the most ideal place for tribulation transcendence." Ji Yufei did not want to undergo tribulation in the human world or any other perfect world because the destruction would be too great. The entire world might be affected and collapse if he was not careful. You want to be invincible among your peers. The disheveled old man suddenly stared at Ji Yufei with glowing eyes. This guy's ambition was higher than the sky. Ji Yufei did not say anything, but from the arrogance on his face, the disheveled old man knew that this was definitely his plan. Otherwise, he would not have chosen this place for tribulation transcendence. Even the disheveled old man could not see through the ancestral mountain range. There would be unknown dangers in undergoing tribulation here. Then let's start preparing. The disheveled old man nodded and said. This time, Jiu Fei did not bring the 4 extreme Dao protectors with him. Otherwise, his chances of success would increase by another 20%. This time, Jiu Fei came to the ancestral world alone with his inner world. The disheveled old man was definitely experienced in tribulation transcendence. Under his command, Jiu Fei and forefather Yingtian got busy. First, they set up the formation. This valley was most suitable for setting up a defensive formation. The disheveled old man decided to set up an extreme Dao defensive formation. The disheveled old man imprinted array patterns on the mountain ridges around the valley as well as the void. In less than half a day, the defensive formation was completed. Boom! The disheveled old man tried to activate the defensive formation. The next moment, there was a loud bang and the entire valley shook. A gigantic divine shield appeared in the void. The surrounding heaven and earth essence chi immediately gathered towards the defensive formation and was devoured by it. The gigantic divine shield enveloped the entire valley. But before long, the divine shield disappeared into the void along with the countless formation patterns. This was only a single layer of defensive formation. The disheveled old man had no intention of stopping and continued to set up the formation. He wanted to set up 9 formations to help Jiu Fei resist the power of the tribulation. Later on, Jiu Fei and forefather Yingtian watched the disheveled old man set up the formation. Other than the 9 layers of defensive formations, the disheveled old man also set up offensive formations in the surrounding mountains. It was not the disheveled old man's style to blindly defend. Now that he had defense and offense, the most important step was the extreme Dao weapon. Jiu Fei had quite a number of extreme Dao weapons and the disheveled old man was one of them. The purple gold godly sword, human empress truncheon, ancestral sword of all gods, mountain and river cauldron, mountain and river diagram, supreme ominous saber, 3-world steely and many more. The human emperor's truncheon was not with Jiu Fei. How the disheveled old man was going to use these extreme Dao weapons was a secret. Jiu Fei had absolute trust in the disheveled old man. He sat cross-legged on an array platform in the middle of the valley and gradually adjusted his condition to the best. I'm finally going to undergo the tribulation. The ultimate leap. From now on, I'll have no more worries and no more fear of opponents. From now on, I'll roam the 3 realms and 6 paths. Who would dare to challenge me? Jiu Fei screamed in his heart. The ultimate leap. If he succeeded, he would be invincible. If he failed, he would die. It was that simple. At this moment, forefather Yingtian had already retreated far away. He had retreated millions of miles away, but he still did not feel safe. After retreating another million miles, he was almost outside the primogenitor mountain range. The disheveled old man was not idling. He was still setting up formations in the sky and on the ground. Countless runes rushed out from the disheveled old man's body and imprinted in all directions. Each rune emitted an extremely powerful energy wave. The disheveled old man was really going all out this time round. Chapter 3751. Jiu Fei's tribulation was a big deal in the eyes of the god of the mountain river cauldron, the disheveled old man who had no aura of a god at all. This time, the disheveled old man set up the array with all his might. Other gods were definitely tall and mighty with an explosive aura, but the disheveled old man didn't think much of it. What was the use of acting tough? The fist was the hard truth. While the disheveled old man was setting up the array, Jiu Fei sat cross-legged in the valley, calmly adjusting his state of mind. The most important thing about the state of the martial body was that the state of mind and the martial body could be in perfect harmony. Only then could the greatest power be exerted. Time passed, and before he knew it, more than half a month had passed. The Yingtian ancestral grounds outside the ancestral mountains were bustling with noise and excitement. The big shots that were rarely seen all jumped out. Isn't that ancestor Tianfeng? Didn't he die in the battle with ancestor Yu Niu 800 years ago? On the square of the Yingtian ancestral hall, several cultivators whispered to a thin daoist beside them. It's just groundless rumors, someone said disapprovingly. There were so many rumors in the cultivation world that anyone who believed them would be a fool. If ancestor Tianfeng had died, how could he appear here? Isn't that the elder of the Jin clan, Jin Xiao? He's not dead either. With the appearance of a few experts of the older generation, many people were extremely shocked. Especially those peerless experts who were rumored to have fallen, they once again appeared in everyone's line of sight, causing quite a commotion. At this time, in the newly built hall of the Yingtian ancestral mountain, the descendant of the Mu clan's ancestor, Mu Jinghong, was already a little impatient. More than half a month had passed, and ancestor Tianfeng hadn't appeared at all. No one knew where he would undergo the tribulation. None of the subsect masters and elders of the ancestral grounds knew where their ancestor was. The only thing they knew was that ancestor Tianfeng had entered the ancestral mountains. Interesting. That guy actually dared to enter the ancestral mountains to undergo the tribulation. Is he really not afraid of death? Mu Jinghong said as he rubbed his nose. Purple hair, blue eyes, and a face so handsome that it was almost perfect. All these factors added together made him look unreal. How could there be such a perfect existence in this world? Master, since we already know that our elder and Prince Mu Chen died in Yingtian sect, why don't we just destroy Yingtian sect? The green-robed old servant said carefully. Uncle Jian, you've followed me for so long, how could you not know my temperament? What was so fun about directly destroying the Yingtian sect? I want old ancestor Yingtian and the people behind him to kneel in front of me, then I'll trample them to death one by one. Only then will I not have made this trip in vain. The purple-haired young man lazily lay on the throne as he spoke indifferently. It was as if he was talking about something that could not be any more ordinary. This purple-haired youth was the one who had killed Yingtian city lord in a second. No one would have thought that he was a descendant of one of the ancestors of the Wood clan. If they knew his identity, Yingtian city lord and the others would probably be scared to death before Mu Jinghong did anything. When Uncle Jian heard this, he didn't dare to say anything more. He lowered his head and stood to the side. The purple-haired youth closed his eyes and took a nap on the throne. At this time, there were only the two of them in the main hall. No one else dared to enter. Moreover, there were only a few people at the peak of Yingtian Ancestor Mountain. Yingtian Ancestor Mountain was the most important place in Yingtian Ancestor Land. Usually, only old ancestor Yingtian was qualified to cultivate on Yingtian Ancestor Mountain. Only those who were on an equal footing with old ancestor Yingtian were qualified to enter Yingtian Ancestor Mountain. On Yingtian Ancestor Mountain, Qingyun Pathmaster, Wutian Sect Master, and Shiju Palace Master were waiting outside the main hall carefully. They didn't dare to take a single step away. The fellow inside was a ruthless person who hid a dagger in his smile. He would kill people at the slightest disagreement. Even the Qingyun Pathmaster and the others didn't dare to slight him. This was because if Mu Jinghong wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. The Qingyun Pathmaster and the others looked forward to the return of Ji Yufei and old ancestor Yingtian. They hoped that they could chase the fellow away or even kill him. Meanwhile, in the Primogenitor mountain range, the disheveled old man hadn't stopped for half a month. With the valley where Ji Yufei was at as the center, the disheveled old man desperately set up formations. The formations were densely packed and there were layers upon layers of formations. Countless Dao patterns rushed out from his body at all times, imprinting in all directions. Countless arrays enveloped the area within a radius of 1,000,000 miles. The power condensed by these arrays could only be described as super terrifying. I, your father, want to fight with you guys, the disheveled old man muttered to himself as he set up the formations. He didn't stop and the area within 1,000,000 miles was filled with formation patterns. They were all shocking killing formations. Old ancestor Yingtian, who was watching from afar, was extremely shocked. Even a quasi-supreme being would be instantly vaporized if he entered a formation of this level. This was a formation that could go against an extreme Dao supreme being. From old ancestor Yingtian's point of view, the disheveled old man was simply too crazy. In order to pass the tribulation, he had actually set up countless formations. The disheveled old man used all the extreme Dao Saint items that Ji Yufei had given him in the killing formations. He also used the extreme Dao weapons that he had obtained from the Ancestor God Realm and the Chaos Demon World. The killing formations set up with the extreme Dao weapons were even more terrifying. The killing intent was shocking, and the terrifying aura that spread out caused even the sky to change color and the sun and moon to dim. As the disheveled old man continued to set up shocking killing formations, the power gathered by the countless killing formations became even stronger. This power was so strong that it seemed to be able to turn the universe upside down. This was also the first time the disheveled old man had used such a big move. Even if it were a formation grandmaster like Erebus, he would definitely feel ashamed of his own inferiority if he were to witness this technique of the disheveled old man. This was an unparalleled formation Dao technique that the disheveled old man had grasped for countless years. It had long surpassed the realm of a formation grandmaster. The Primogenitor mountain range was the center of the entire Primogenitor world and was the source of the endless ancestral veins of the Primogenitor world. Even though this place wasn't suitable for cultivation, there was no doubt that the Primogenitor mountain range contained unimaginable power. What the disheveled old man wanted to do now was to draw the power of the mountain range for his own use. Borrowing the power of heaven and earth to go against the heavenly tribulation wasn't a new method. It was the most primitive method. However, the disheveled old man wanted to borrow the power of the Primogenitor mountain range. The disheveled old man was very confident in the killing formations that he had set up. Even if an extreme Dao Supreme being were to come personally, he wouldn't be afraid. If an extreme Dao Supreme being dared to barge into the killing formations, he would just have to kill him. This was the disheveled old man's confidence. Chapter 3752. The mountain river cauldron had existed for an unknown period of time. It was said that the mountain river cauldron had been around since the mythological era. One could only imagine how long it had existed. Compared to He Tian, the disheveled old man was the true number one expert in formation Dao. In front of the disheveled old man, formation grandmasters were akin to ants. As the disheveled old man was setting up the formation, Ji Yufei was seated on a huge rock in the middle of the valley, motionless as though he had turned into a stone statue. A gentle breeze blew past, lifting a strand of Ji Yufei's hair. His clothes fluttered gently as a figure appeared silently before Ji Yufei. F***ck, I'm so tired. The disheveled old man sat down beside Ji Yufei and wiped the sweat off his forehead. This fella sure is carefree. The disheveled old man glanced at Ji Yufei and shook his head with a smile. The stronger Ji Yufei was, the better it was for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have valued Ji Yufei so much. Ji Yufei remained motionless. Go through the tribulation in peace. You'll succeed. With that said, the disheveled old man turned into a beam of divine light that shot into the skies. With a loud bang, he exploded in the sky above the valley. In the next moment, countless beams of light scattered in all directions and disappeared into the surrounding void. Then, countless formation runes appeared in the void. They were densely packed in the sky and on the ground, they were everywhere. The formation patterns did not just cover the area near the valley. Instead, it covered the entire area within a radius of 10,000 miles with the valley as the center. The Patriarch Ying Tian, who was watching from afar, was almost scared ***less by the scene before him. The aura emitted by the formation was way too terrifying. Patriarch Ying Tian knew that if he dared to take a single step into the area before him, he would be destroyed in both body and spirit essence the next moment. Formations that covered an area of 10,000 miles weren't rare in the Primogenitor's world. The problem was that the disheveled old man had set up countless killing formations within the area. Layers upon layers of formations stacked on top of one another, covering the entire area in the sky and on the ground. It could be said that the valley that Ji Yufei was in had become a forbidden area that even an extreme supremacy couldn't set foot in. At this moment, even an extreme supremacy wouldn't be able to do anything to Ji Yufei. The god of the mountain and river cauldron, the old man, had even sacrificed himself. Amidst the countless killing formations, an ancient cauldron appeared. Very soon, the countless killing formations that had appeared in the sky, on the ground, and in the void disappeared into the void again. The clouds in the sky were calm and the wind was gentle, as if nothing had ever appeared. The Primogenitor mountain range finally quietened down. In the past half a month, The disheveled old man had wreaked havoc within a radius of 10,000 miles. The few ferocious birds and beasts in the mountain ridges had all been chased away by him. Although there weren't many vicious birds and beasts in the Primogenitor mountain ridge, none of them were easy to mess with. The weakest was a harmless-looking rabbit. However, the disheveled old man was almost bitten by the rabbit when he encountered it. The disheveled old man was so angry that he directly threw the rabbit into the depths of the Primogenitor mountain range. At this moment, Jiu Fei had also reached the most crucial moment. He was in an extremely mysterious state where his martial body and soul were perfectly fused together. This time, Jiu Fei's entire body was filled with life. Even if a strand of hair fell, he could be reborn. It would be difficult for him to die even if he wanted to. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped for Jiu Fei. Meanwhile, the people outside were waiting anxiously. However, a month passed and there was still no movement. 2 months passed and there was still no movement. 3 months, 4 months. A year later, there was still no movement. This made old ancestor Yingtian, who was guarding outside the countless killing formations, speechless. The extreme Tao heavenly tribulation was different from ordinary heavenly tribulations. Once it was activated, the great Tao of heaven and earth would be shaken. To the extreme supremacy in the Primogenitor realm, they would be able to capture the subtle changes in heaven and earth in an instant. Therefore, no matter where Jiu Fei was undergoing the tribulation, he wouldn't be able to hide once the extreme Tao heavenly tribulation was activated. Of course, no one would dare to fight him to the death here. It didn't matter to Jiu Fei. He wasn't in a hurry. At this time, the cultivators gathered in the Yingtian clan couldn't wait any longer. A small portion of them directly left. Soon, there were rumors that old ancestor Yingtian wasn't preparing to undergo the tribulation at all. There were also people who said that old ancestor Yingtian was really about to undergo the tribulation and was still preparing. It was the extreme Tao heavenly tribulation, so how could it be done so casually? Of course, one had to be fully prepared before triggering the tribulation. The real big shots naturally didn't care about this little bit of time. However, even the big shots couldn't sit still because they had stayed in the Yingtian ancestral ground for 10 years. 90% of the people there had already left. Only the sect ancestors of the various sects and the big shots who were on equal footing with old ancestor Yingtian were still waiting. Jiu Fei had been sitting there for 10 years, so many people began to doubt him. Then, on a dark and windy night, something big happened in the Yingtian ancestral ground. The wood race's ancestor, Mu Jinghong, directly took action and subdued the Azure Cloud Pathmaster and the other 2 quasi-supreme experts. Uncle Jian, Mu Jinghong's old servant, attacked powerfully and killed the 36th monastery master of the Yingtian clan. Even the 36th monastery's grand elder died to his sword. The 12-branch sect masters were all subdued by Mu Jinghong's thunderous methods and didn't dare to resist in the slightest. The entire Yingtian clan was directly under Mu Jinghong's control. All the big shots in the Yingtian clan were indescribably shocked, not knowing what had happened. What is Mu Jinghong playing at? The Jin race's elder Jin Xiao jumped out of nowhere and directly appeared in the sky above the Yingtian ancestral ground. Looking down, he saw an azure-robed elder fighting with an expert. That was an elder of the Azure Cloud Path. His sword Dao cultivation was incomparably powerful, and he was currently fighting with Uncle Jian. In an instant, the entire ancestral mountain was filled with sword chi. Rays of shocking sword light shot into the sky and directly slashed into the starry sky. Wherever the sword light passed, stars would be cleaved into 2 before exploding. The power of the sword Dao of a Saint Emperor was extremely powerful. Mu Jinghong sent another servant to show off. Jin Xiao couldn't help but look disdainful when he saw this. Mu Jinghong was too high profile. Wasn't it just because he had an extreme Tao for a father? If he didn't have an extreme Tao for a father, who knew how many times he would have been killed by others? Swish. At this moment, 2 figures instantly crossed each other, and the dazzling sword light that filled the void disappeared. Uncle Jian put away the divine sword in his hand and slowly turned around. There was not a trace of expression on his face. A hole had been torn on his shoulder, and blood was seeping out. At this moment, The elder of the azure cloud path suddenly trembled, and a sword mark appeared on his forehead. He directly fell to the ground. Chapter 3753. Ying Tianzong was completely under Mu Jinghong's control. Mu Jinghong's thunderous methods shocked everyone in the ancestral land. No one knew what he was planning. After all, Ying Tianzong was a force under the Wood tribe. How dare he betray the Wood tribe? The Wood tribe was a first-rate force in the ancestral realm. It was extremely powerful, yet Ying Tianzong dared to betray the Wood tribe. The Azure Cloud Pathmaster, Palace Master Shijue, and the Skyless Sect ancestor were all suppressed by Mu Jinghong's thunderous methods. The great figures who came to Ying Tianzong's ancestral land as guests were all dumbfounded when they heard the news. Did Ying Tianzong ally with the other three forces to betray the Wood tribe? This was no small matter. The combined strength of the four forces was strong enough to sweep through the territories controlled by the Wood tribe. However, Mu Jinghong was able to suppress three quasi-sovereigns. This kind of combat strength was shocking. Very soon, a storm of blood erupted in the ancestral land. Those who dared to resist Mu Jinghong were all killed by him. The guests were dumbfounded. Almost all the experts of the Azure Cloud Path, Palace Master Shijue, and the Skyless Sect were gathered in the ancestral land. Mu Jinghong's attack practically wiped out the four great forces in one go. This Mu Jinghong is a bull. The guests were happy to watch the show, especially the Jin clan, Water clan, Fire clan, Earth clan, Thunder clan, and tyrannical Sky dynasty. These forces could contend against the Wood tribe. An elder-level existence came from the Jin clan, Jin Xiao. At this time, Jin Xiao stood in the sky above Ying Tianzong Ancestral Mountain, coldly watching the slaughter in the ancestral land. This had nothing to do with him, so he was happy to watch the show. In the sky, apart from Jin Xiao, there were many other experts watching the show. Haha, is that Mu Jinghong crazy again? A scarlet-haired young man with a fiery aura wrapped around his body laughed loudly in the sky. A powerful fire elemental aura erupted from his body, causing the surrounding void to distort. Hu Chaotian, if you keep talking nonsense, I'll kill you. A cold voice suddenly sounded from the great hall at the peak of the ancestral mountain. Then, a figure walked out of the hall and coldly looked at the red-haired youth in the sky. When the red-haired youth, Hu Chaotian, heard Mu Jinghong's words, he said disdainfully, "Do you have the ability to do so?" Mu Jinghong had a great background, but the red-haired young man, Hu Chaotian, also had a great background. With the Hua clan's strength, they could definitely contend against the Wood clan. Others might be afraid of Mu Jinghong, but Hu Chaotian didn't put Mu Jinghong in his eyes at all. Both of them were descendants of supreme beings. Who was stronger and who was weaker could only be determined through a fight. Mu Jinghong's expression turned cold. In the next moment, he extended his right hand and slapped Hu Chaotian, who was in the sky. Boom! A huge green hand appeared in the void like a huge mountain, pressing down on Hu Chaotian in the sky. The power of a quasi-supreme being directly shook the void between heaven and earth. This was really starting a fight at the slightest disagreement. The nearby experts hurriedly retreated. Once these two fellows got into action, it would not be a joke. If they were to be affected, they would definitely die. Then I'll play with you. Hu Chaotian waved his right hand, and a ray of fiery light immediately rushed out of his hand. In an instant, it soared for thousands of miles, as if it was splitting the universe with a blade. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky in shock. The dazzling blade light lit up the night sky, and directly fell on Yingtian Ancestor Mountain below. Boom! The blade light and the huge hand collided. The blade light collapsed, and the huge hand dissipated. The power of two quasi-supreme beings cancelled each other out, and then spread out majestically. The void between the two great experts immediately collapsed, and pitch-black spatial cracks appeared. Countless fire elemental Dao patterns and wood elemental Dao patterns collapsed. Kill! Hu Chaotian's domineering aura soared into the sky. He reached out and pulled out a divine blade from behind his back, and then directly attacked Mu Jinghong, who was at the peak of Yingtian Ancestor Mountain. He cultivated the fire elemental Dao, and his weapon was a blade. The blade was the weapon of an overlord, and anyone who used a blade was an existence that overflowed with domineering aura. At this moment, Mu Jinghong, who was standing in front of the main hall, shook his body, and the shadow of a huge divine tree directly emerged from his body. That divine tree directly swept towards Hu Chaotian, who was attacking him. Hu Chaotian was taken aback. In the next moment, a ferocious and terrifying beast emerged from his body, and in the next moment, an endless amount of fire energy surged out from the beast's body. The shadow of the fire beast rushed out from Hu Chaotian's body, and directly pounced forward. In the next moment, the shadow of the fire beast collided with the shadow of the divine tree. This time, there was no explosion. The fire beast that rushed out from Hu Chaotian's body was directly swept away by the shadow of the divine tree. However, the divine flame that the fire beast spat out almost burned the divine tree to ashes. This made Mu Jinghong both shocked and furious. This guy's cultivation seemed to have increased by a lot. Haha, you want to kill me with this little ability? Are you joking with me? Hu Chaotian laughed loudly. Mu Jinghong's eyes flickered when he heard this. However, he did not say anything. Instead, a green light flashed across the sky like a bolt of lightning. Hu Chaotian subconsciously used the divine blade in his hand to block it. Ding! With a soft sound, he felt his hand shake, as if he had been hit by a huge force. The divine blade in his hand almost flew out of his hand. The thing that hit the divine blade turned out to be an inconspicuous slender wooden needle. Come, let's fight to our heart's content. Hu Chaotian roared angrily, and directly attacked. Mu Jinghong didn't say anything and just went up to meet him. The two great powerhouses fought, which shocked all the big shots in Yingtian ancestral land. Mu Jinghong was actually fighting Hu Chaotian. The Wood Clan and the Fire Clan were the two great superpowers of the ancestral realm, while Mu Jinghong and Hu Chaotian were fighting. In a valley far away in the ancestral mountain range, a figure sitting on a large rock in the middle of the valley suddenly opened his eyes. In the pitch-black void, it was as if two bolts of lightning had flashed, illuminating the darkness. It's time. The figure sitting cross-legged on the boulder suddenly raised his head to look at the sky and said these words. This person was naturally Ji Yufei. Are we going to start? The moment Ji Yufei opened his eyes, the disheveled old man's voice came from the sky. How long have I been sitting here? Ji Yufei asked. 10 years. The disheveled old man's voice rang out again. 10 years in a row. Ji Yufei was stunned, but he immediately understood. For a peak quasi-supreme being like him, time no longer meant anything to him. Chapter 3754. Ji Yufei had been sitting there for 10 years and was finally about to undergo his tribulation. At the same time, Mu Jinghong had waited for 10 years and still hadn't seen Yingtian's tribulation. Thus, he had decisively taken control of the Yingtian sect. This time, Ji Yufei had dug a huge pit for the wood race. To the outside world, it was the wood race's ancestor who was about to undergo his tribulation. The big shots of the wood race naturally couldn't sit still when the ancestor was about to undergo his tribulation. The Yingtian sect was only a subordinate force of the wood race. If the ancestor was still a quasi-supreme, he naturally wouldn't dare to have any disloyal thoughts. However, if the ancestor succeeded in his final leap, it would be a different matter. Since ancient times, which extreme grade supremes were willing to submit to others? Unless they were under someone else's control and had no choice but to obey. However, it was extremely difficult to subdue an extreme grade supremacy. It was precisely because of this that Mu Jinghong, a descendant of a supremacy, came to the Yingtian ancestral land. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to such a small place since it wasn't some peerless treasure ground. 10 years was Mu Jinghong's limit. He didn't want to wait any longer. Mu Jinghong's identity as a descendant of the wood race's supremacy was there. After all, there weren't many people who dared to oppose him. Even so, many experts of the four great forces in the Yingtian ancestral land had died. Mu Jinghong was killing the chicken to warn the monkey. The wood race was one of the 5 elemental races of the primogenitor realm. Each of the 5 elemental races had an extreme grade supremacy. They had existed for countless years and were old powerhouses of the primogenitor realm. Under the night sky, Two powerful figures were rapidly moving in the sky above the Yingtian ancestral land, engaged in an intense battle. Hu Chaotian has a fiery temper. He fights wherever he goes. He's indeed a madman. In the sky, the elder of the gold race, Jin Xiao, stared at the two experts fighting in front of him and muttered to himself. Golden rays flickered in his eyes. These two fellows were both peak quasi-supreme beings, and they were also descendants of supreme beings. When the two of them met, they naturally had to fight it out. In the primogenitor realm, the 5 elemental races didn't form an alliance. They were independent clans. The relationship between the 5 races was very complicated. The wood race and the fire race had some grievances. Otherwise, Hu Chaotian wouldn't have clashed with Mu Jinghong right from the start. The fiery light radiating from Hu Chaotian's heavenly fire blade illuminated the entire sky. It was as if a monstrous divine flame was burning in the sky. Even the clouds in the sky were dispersed by the heavenly fire qi. All the experts in the Ying Tian ancestral land looked at the shocking scene in the sky in shock. This was definitely the rhythm of heavenly fire burning the sky. The heat wave that came down from the sky made people feel like they were sitting next to a blazing fire. Their bodies were unbearably hot, and it felt like the essence qi in their bodies had been ignited. Those with weak cultivations had no choice but to circulate their secret arts to contend against the heat waves. The battle prowess displayed by Hu Chaotian and Mu Jinghong shocked everyone present. A faintly discernible supreme pressure enveloped the entire heaven and earth. This was the sign of their bloodline power being stimulated. Hu Chaotian and Mu Jinghong were the descendants of a supreme being. Moreover, they were the second generation of a supreme being. The supreme bloodline they inherited was extremely pure. Once they stimulated the supreme bloodline in their bodies, they could easily become a saint. They could also cultivate to the quasi-supreme realm in the shortest time possible. However, the supreme bloodline had both advantages and disadvantages for these second-generation supreme beings. The advantage was that their cultivation speed was much faster than ordinary people, and their physiques were much stronger than ordinary cultivators. The disadvantage was that it was almost impossible for them to take the final step and make the final leap. The supreme bloodline in their bodies was a kind of suppression, a kind of supreme suppression. It was almost impossible for them to surpass their fathers. Although it was almost impossible for them to make the final leap, they were still much stronger than ordinary quasi-supreme beings. Otherwise, Mu Jinghong wouldn't have been able to subdue the Green Cloud Pathmaster and the other 2 quasi-supreme beings in one move. At this time, in the mountain ridges outside the Ying Tian ancestral land, a huge chase was taking place in the dusky wild forest. Where did Brother Fei go? A guy covered in blood passed through a short forest and rushed into the ancient forest on the opposite side. Then, he hid behind a towering ancient tree. That person was Yang Zhon. He had been separated from the 36th monastery's people, each fleeing for their own lives. After Grand Elder Qi Yuan had been killed by Jian Bo, he and the others had directly fled from the Ying Tian ancestral land. If they stayed there, there would only be one result: death. No one wanted to die, so they could only take the risk and flee. It was a good thing Jiyu Fei had left behind a backup plan. Otherwise, Yang Zhon and the others could only be slaughtered. Before leaving, Jiyu Fei had left behind a bit of energy in Yang Zhon's body. It was this energy that had allowed Yang Zhon and the other elders and disciples to directly kill their way out of the Ying Tian ancestral land. Rumble. At this moment, a thunderous rumble came from the direction of the Ying Tian ancestral land. Yang Zhon was startled. Just at this moment, something suddenly flew over the forest. He was startled and was just about to flee. Just as Yang Zhon moved, a ball of divine light smashed down from the sky. That ball of divine light directly smashed into the ancient forest. In the next moment, Yang Zhon felt the ground beneath his feet shake. Then, he felt a suction force enveloping him and pulling him forward. Yang Zhon saw the surrounding trees being uprooted, and he also flew forward. There was a war chariot floating in the air above the ancient forest. The beast pulling the chariot was letting out a low roar. There was a black-armored immortal general standing on the chariot. It was this black-armored immortal general. That ball of divine light blossomed in the ancient forest, and an extremely powerful devouring power surged out from within the divine light. The surrounding towering ancient trees were uprooted one after another and flew towards that ball of divine light. Even the soil, sand, and stones were swallowed up. Yang Zhon sneered and waved his right hand. An extremely sharp sword light immediately rushed out from his hand, breaking through the devouring power and rushing out. Just as Yang Zhon was about to escape that devouring energy, a ray of divine light descended from the sky, instantly arriving in front of Yang Zhon. Do you think I'm a sick cat if I don't show off my power? Yang Zhon was truly enraged. He reached out with his right hand and grabbed the incoming ray of divine light. In the next instant, the ray of divine light dissipated, and a battle spear appeared in his hand. I'll return it to you. Yang Zhon roared and threw the spear at the war chariot in the sky. It directly nailed the beast, pulling the chariot to death in the air. What? When the black-armored celestial general saw this, his shock was no small matter. In the next moment, Yang Zhon slapped his palm at the war chariot in the sky. Boom! With a loud noise, the entire war chariot exploded. The black-armored immortal general's immortal body turned into a mist of blood, and he immediately died. At this moment, an extremely powerful aura of the divine path erupted from Yang Zhon's body. Chapter 3755. Yang Zhon killed the black-armored immortal general with a single palm strike, but in the next moment, he was terrified. That was because at that moment, more than a dozen Sage Realm spirit consciousnesses locked onto him. Swoosh! Yang Zhon directly rushed down from the sky and fled into the mountain ridge. Where do you think you're going? More than a dozen Sage Realm experts directly chased after Yang Zhon. Senior brother Yang Zhon is so righteous. An elder disciple hiding behind a large rock in the distance was extremely moved when he saw this scene. Sacrificing yourself to save others, you're our role model. Daoist Yang Zhon, I admire you. If you die, I'll erect a monument for you. A few elders hiding at the side glanced at each other and directly turned around to flee into the darkness. Because Yang Zhon had allowed the Sage Realm experts who were chasing after them to escape. At this moment, Yang Zhon was fleeing with all his might. He didn't want to be a hero, but he had unintentionally done it once, and the consequences were that he was in danger. Buzz! At this moment, heaven and earth suddenly shook, and a terrifying fluctuation spread from the Primogenitor mountain range. At this moment, heaven and earth shook, and at this moment, the world was incomparably silent. Even Hua Chaotian and Mu Jinghong, who were fighting in the sky above the Yingtian ancestral land, stopped. At this moment, their expressions changed drastically, and they suddenly turned to look at the Primogenitor mountain range. An aura that made their souls tremble mightily came from the direction of the Primogenitor mountain range. Apart from Hua Chaotian and Mu Jinghong, all existences above the Sage Realm sensed this terrifying aura. This aura seemed to originate from heaven and earth. Supreme heavenly tribulation? Hua Chaotian and Mu Jinghong glanced at each other. In the next moment, the two of them instantly turned into two rays of divine light and rushed toward the Primogenitor mountain range, disappearing into the pitch-black night in the blink of an eye. The aura that came from the Primogenitor mountain range wasn't powerful, but the moment it erupted, all the extreme supremes in the Primogenitor realm sensed it immediately. Is someone going to take that step again? An incomparably old voice came from the depths of the Wood clan's ancestral land. At the same time, Extreme Supreme's divine senses rushed out from various parts of the Primogenitor realm and entered the Primogenitor mountain range. Distance was no longer a problem for Extreme Supremes. Even if it was an infinite distance away, the spirit sense of an Extreme Tao Sovereign could reach it instantly. This was the power of an Extreme Tao Sovereign. Apart from Extreme Tao Sovereigns, no one else could understand the power of an Extreme Tao Sovereign. Extreme Supreme's divine senses could reach them in an instant. When was the last time for someone made the ultimate leap? All I did was take a nap and 8,000 years have passed. Some Extreme Tao Supremes who were familiar with each other were conversing. The divine senses of Supremes stretched far and wide. At this time, the entire Primogenitor realm was in an uproar. Countless experts walked out of their cultivation grounds and headed towards the Primogenitor mountain range. However, That aura that made even a quasi-supreme being's heart palpitate suddenly retreated like a tide, and in the end, completely disappeared, as if it had never appeared. The teleportation array near the Primogenitor mountain range didn't stop after the aura appeared. However, the aura that made even quasi-supreme's heart palpitate suddenly retreated like the tide and disappeared completely, as if it had never appeared. With the arrival of experts from various regions in the Primogenitor world, the area outside the Primogenitor mountain range gradually became livelier. Moreover, the forces outside the Primogenitor mountain range were all saints and above. When some saints walked out of the teleportation array of some small forces outside the Primogenitor mountain range, those small forces were all dumbfounded. It's finally starting. In a prison of the Yingtian clan's ancestral land, 3 fellows who were paralyzed on the ground like dead dogs stood up when they sensed the aura. That mysterious aura made the souls of saints above the saint level tremble. It was a fear that came from the depths of their souls. They knew Ji Fei's plan. It wasn't old ancestor Yingtian's tribulation, but the terrifying black-robed youth's tribulation. At this time, they hoped that Ji Fei would succeed. They wanted to see if Mu Jinghong was still as arrogant in front of Ji Fei. It's been 10 years. Don't fail. Green Cloud Path Master murmured. What are you talking about? You must succeed. Wutian Sect Master glared at Green Cloud Path Master and said. Sigh. Green Cloud Path Master sighed and didn't say anything else. He was the high and mighty Green Cloud Path Master, the ruler of billions of living beings. When had he ever been locked up in a prison? It was a great humiliation to him, and he wanted to return the humiliation to Mu Jinghong tenfold, no, 100-fold. Palace Master Shiju didn't say anything. His crown was tilted to one side, and his clothes were covered in dust. It was a quasi-supreme level robe, but it was covered in dust. Green Cloud Path Master and Wutian Sect Master were also in a sorry state. Their quasi-supreme level cultivation had been sealed by Mu Jinghong using a secret technique. Now, they were like mortals who couldn't use any divine abilities. At this moment, several killing formations appeared near the valley where Ji Fei was, and the terrifying murderous aura was earth-shattering. With the valley where Ji Fei was as the center, the sky above the region within 1,000,000 miles was shrouded by dark clouds. Bright lightning flashed from time to time in the dark clouds. Finally, thousands of miles away, old ancestor Ying Tian couldn't help but be excited when he saw the scene in front of him. Old ancestor Ying Tian couldn't help but be excited. It was a supreme heavenly tribulation. Since ancient times, how many people were as lucky as him to be able to watch the supreme heavenly tribulation? This kind of heavenly tribulation wasn't something that just anyone could watch. Old ancestor Ying Tian immediately retreated to a place further away and carefully hid himself. He couldn't be discovered, or else Ji Fei's plan would be ruined. In fact, he was being too careful. At this time, the world was filled with the destructive aura of heaven and earth. Even an supreme level wouldn't be able to sense old ancestor Ying Tian under such circumstances. Boom. Suddenly, a dazzling lightning appeared in the tribulation clouds and instantly lit up the world. That is, old ancestor Ying Tian vaguely saw something in the tribulation clouds, but it wasn't real. At this moment, Ji Fei, who had attracted the supreme heavenly tribulation, was still sitting cross-legged on the boulder in the middle of the valley. It was his aura that attracted the supreme heavenly tribulation. Are you ready? The disheveled old man's voice came from the sky. I'm ready. Ji Fei suddenly looked up into the sky, and an aura that was 10 times stronger erupted from his body. In the next moment, the tribulation clouds in the sky suddenly surged violently. Rumble. A terrifying and monstrous destructive aura descended from the sky, and the entire region was shaking. At this moment, Ji Fei's eyes were brighter than the stars in the sky. Haha, come on, isn't it just the supreme heavenly tribulation? Ji Fei roared with laughter. Chapter 3756. Ji Fei had finally triggered the heavenly tribulation. It was no ordinary heavenly tribulation, but the tribulation of the Supreme Martial Highness realm. If he could overcome the heavenly tribulation, he would achieve the ultimate leap and become the second Supreme Martial Highness after the Supreme Martial Progenitor. At this moment, Ji Yufei's aura was fully unleashed. Even Ancestor Yingtian, who was thousands of miles away, could feel his soul trembling. The extreme fear directly erupted from the depths of Ancestor Yingtian's soul, causing his body to tremble uncontrollably. He was shocked to the extreme. They were both quasi-supremes, but Ji Yufei was much stronger than him. In front of Ji Yufei, he was simply as insignificant as an ant. This was the gap between them. Ancestor Yingtian would not accept it unless he reached it. Rumble, up in the sky, the tribulation clouds shrouded the entire area. Lightning flashed from time to time. The black tribulation clouds descended from the sky and almost touched the ground. A terrifying aura that could destroy the world spread in all directions. At this moment, with the valley where Ji Yufei was at as the center, the area within thousands of miles was shrouded by the tribulation clouds. The ferocious birds and beasts in the mountains were extremely terrified and immediately fled the area shrouded by the tribulation clouds. As a result, there were countless ferocious birds and beasts fleeing for their lives in the mountains. Is this the supreme heavenly tribulation? At this moment, some powerful figures began to appear in the nearby area. It had been a long time since anyone in the ancestral realm triggered a supreme heavenly tribulation. The commotion caused by Ji Yufei's heavenly tribulation was too great. It was impossible not to notice it. A black-robed young man appeared on a mountain peak and looked at the tribulation clouds in front of him. At this moment, the power of the heavenly tribulation disturbed the entire area. Even the divine sense of a quasi-supreme martial artist couldn't enter the area shrouded by the heavenly tribulation. This aura. Isn't Ancestor Yingtian undergoing the heavenly tribulation? Some quasi-supreme martial artists who knew Ancestor Yingtian were shocked. However, it was possible that Ancestor Yingtian's aura had changed after cultivating in seclusion for 1,800 years. Soon, more than a dozen quasi-supreme divine senses descended from the sky and landed outside the area shrouded by the tribulation clouds. The divine senses turned into a dozen blurry figures. A manifestation of divine will, an extreme paragon. Some people couldn't help being shocked when they saw those blurry yet terrifying figures. Although those figures seemed to be on the verge of dissipating, no one dared to underestimate them. The aura emanating from each figure seemed to be able to crush the ages. It was as if they were gods who had split the heavens during the primordial era, suppressing everyone to the point of suffocation. Their arrival seemed to have disturbed the entire world. At this time, in the mountain valley below the tribulation clouds, Ji Yufei had already stood up. He looked up at the tribulation clouds in the sky, vast and mighty primordial chaos energy surging around him. His long hair fluttered even though there was no wind, and his fighting spirit was shocking. Primordial chaos divine light shot out of his eyes, reaching tens of miles long, and shot straight up into the sky from the valley. Come, I want to see how powerful the supreme heavenly tribulation is. Ji Yufei stared at the turbulent tribulation clouds in the sky and suddenly felt heroic and confident. His entire body was filled with power. At this moment, he felt that he was omnipotent. So what if it was a supreme heavenly tribulation? He could shatter it with a punch. As if to punish Ji Yufei for looking down on heaven's might, a dazzling bolt of lightning suddenly bombarded the valley from the tribulation clouds in the sky. That bolt of lightning was even larger than a mountain. That bolt of lightning directly bombarded Ji Yufei's body. Ji Yufei, who was bombarded by this bolt of lightning, wasn't injured at all. Instead, he was bathed in the lightning. In the next moment, countless bolts of lightning directly entered his body. Ji Yufei was devouring the powerful force brought by the lightning. Come at me fiercely. Ji Yufei roared at the tribulation clouds in the sky. Rumble. This time, 9 bolts of lightning with terrifying destructive power shot out from the tribulation clouds at the same time. They instantly landed on Ji Yufei's body. In the next moment, Ji Yufei's clothes immediately turned into dust. Not even a fragment was left. Just as Ji Yufei's clothes were blasted into dust by the lightning, a sky-blue celestial light suddenly surged out of his body. Within the celestial light, countless Dao patterns appeared and intertwined. A battle robe appeared on Ji Yufei's body. It was the sky-blue immortal gold battle robe that Ji Yufei had obtained in the deserted world. The 9 bolts of lightning that struck Jiu Fei were all blocked by the sky blue immortal gold battle robe. Countless Dao patterns appeared on the sky blue immortal gold battle robe. The terrifying lightning that was enough to destroy heaven and earth blasted the sky blue immortal gold battle robe. Not a single mark was left on the area that was struck. At this time, Jiu Fei flipped his right hand and a black sword immediately appeared in his hand. On the black sword, specks of starlight twinkled. It was as if there was a starry sky inside the sword. This was the sword that Jiu Fei had refined himself. It was called the 9th Heaven Star's Sword. At this time, the 9th Heaven Star's Sword was constantly transforming as Jiu Fei's cultivation continued to increase. Humans had to go through tribulations, and so did magic treasures. The 9th Heaven Star's Sword and the sky blue immortal gold battle robe that Jiu Fei had refined were not extreme Dao weapons. He wanted to use this opportunity to refine the 9th Heaven Star's Sword and the sky blue immortal gold battle robe into true extreme Dao weapons. At this time, the heavenly tribulation finally started. Endless power gathered in a frenzy and then increased, turning into destructive lightning. It broke through the layers of tribulation clouds and blasted towards Jiu Fei below. Good timing. Jiu Fei waved the 9th Heaven Star's sword in his hand and stood on the array platform. He collided with the lightning that descended from the sky and endured the baptism of the lightning tribulation. It has finally begun. Outside the area enveloped by the heavenly tribulation, everyone was nervous, especially those quasi-supremes, who were excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. However, the heaven and earth were in chaos at this time. The area enveloped by the heavenly tribulation actually blocked everyone's spiritual force. Even the spiritual force of those supremes couldn't enter the range of the heavenly tribulation. In this way, no one knew what was happening inside. Everyone looked at the divine lightning that bombarded from the tribulation clouds in the sky in shock. Even though they were thousands of miles away, those cultivators could feel the terrifying destructive aura coming from the heaven and earth. All of them were extremely terrified. Some of them retreated even further away to avoid it. No one could intervene in a battle of this level. Even if an supremes wanted to intervene, they would end up dead, let alone other cultivators. At this time, in the valley, Jiu Fei had already been enveloped by the endless lightning that descended from the sky. The destructive aura made one's heart palpitate. Every inch of the void in the valley was filled with lightning. This was the first attack of the supreme heavenly tribulation, the lightning tribulation. Chapter 37:57. The sovereign's heavenly tribulation was activated and the lightning tribulation descended. This wasn't an ordinary lightning tribulation, but the strongest lightning tribulation in the world. Every lightning bolt that struck down at Jiu Fei from the tribulation clouds had the power to destroy the world. If it was an ordinary peak quasi-supremacy expert, they wouldn't even be able to withstand a single lightning bolt and would be destroyed in both body and soul. The heavenly tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range was much stronger than the heavenly tribulation in the outside world. The first wave of lightning tribulation was the myriad lightning heavenly tribulation that would cause ordinary pinnacle quasi-supremes to feel despair. At this moment, Jiu Fei was standing on the array platform, brandishing the 9 Heaven Stars sword to continuously disperse the lightning tribulation that descended from the sky. 8,339, 8,340, 8,341, Jiu Fei muttered in his heart. He had blocked more than 8,000 bolts of tribulation lightning, but his face was not red nor was he out of breath. The starlight inside the 9 Heaven Stars sword in his hand was getting brighter and brighter. Under the tempering of the lightning tribulation, the 9 Heavenly Stars sword in Jiu Fei's hand was constantly transforming and a trace of extreme Dao aura seeped out from the sword. Under the bombardment of the tribulation lightning, the 9 Heavenly Stars sword in Jiu Fei's hand seemed to gradually gain life. This surprised and delighted Jiu Fei. The birth of a life deity was the sign of a Dao artifact evolving into an extreme Dao artifact. Jiu Fei's sky blue immortal gold battle armor also became even more resplendent under the tempering of the tribulation lightning. It was also evolving into an extreme Dao artifact. There's indeed something wrong here. If I were to undergo the heavenly tribulation elsewhere, there wouldn't be a myriad lightning tribulation. At this moment, the disheveled old man's voice rang in Ji Fei's heart. I don't care what heavenly tribulation it is. I'll disperse it all. Ji Fei said domineeringly. Good. You're ambitious. Let's join forces and fight against those fellows here. The disheveled old man seemed to be infected by Ji Fei's heroic spirit. He also became heroic and wanted to fight against some things in the Primogenitor mountain range. With the disheveled old man's experience and knowledge, he naturally noticed something. However, he didn't say it out loud. There was a shocking secret hidden in the Primogenitor mountain range. Cultivators couldn't undergo their tribulations in the Primogenitor mountain range. Once they did so, the power of the heavenly tribulation would increase greatly and become much more terrifying than the outside world. However, Ji Fei didn't believe it. He wanted to become the strongest extreme grade supreme in the world, so he chose to undergo his tribulation in the Primogenitor mountain range. As a result, the first wave of the extreme path heavenly tribulation was an extremely rare 10,000 lightning heavenly tribulation. This 10,000 lightning heavenly tribulation was simply too terrifying. Those who could survive the 10,000 lightning heavenly tribulation were absolutely amazing. One had to know that even if it was a sovereign heavenly tribulation, the first wave of the 1,000 lightning tribulation was already enough to make one despair. The moment Ji Fei blocked the 9,000th bolt of tribulation lightning, the tribulation lightning suddenly stopped. However, the terrifying aura of destruction that descended from the tribulation clouds in the sky became even stronger. What's going on? Ji Fei looked up at the tribulation clouds in the sky and sent a voice transmission to the disheveled old man. The strongest 1,000 bolts of tribulation lightning are about to be activated. The disheveled old man's voice rang out in Ji Fei's heart. Aren't you going to help me out? Ji Fei asked. Good steel should be used on the blade. This is just the beginning, I won't interfere. The disheveled old man replied. Ji Fei was a little speechless. At this moment, the world suddenly fell silent. There were no more sounds of thunder and it was as though the world had lost its sound. The lightning that flashed continuously within the tribulation clouds in the sky had disappeared as well. If not for the fact that the tribulation clouds were still shrouding the sky, Ji Fei would have suspected that the heavenly tribulation had already passed. It's coming. Ji Fei's pupils that were staring at the tribulation clouds in the sky suddenly constricted. An immortal bolt of lightning suddenly appeared in the tribulation clouds, breaking through the tribulation clouds silently and expanding rapidly in his eyes. Ji Fei was truly shocked. Could the last 1,000 bolts of tribulation lightning be the legendary 9 heavens annihilation thunder that could destroy the world? Before Ji Fei could react, that bolt of annihilation thunder had already blasted on Ji Fei's body. The next moment, he was shrouded by that immortal destructive lightning. The array platform beneath his feet exploded. Boom! With a loud bang, the endless array patterns were blasted and scattered in the void. He actually triggered such a heavenly thunder. Outside the area shrouded by the tribulation clouds, a quasi-supreme martial artist in the sky almost exclaimed. Since when did this patriarch Ying Tian become so powerful? Someone said in shock. This 10,000 thunder heavenly tribulation wasn't something that an ordinary peak quasi-supreme martial artist could withstand. Patriarch Ying Tian was just a patriarch of a second-rate sect. Even an extreme martial artist couldn't see Ji Fei who was undergoing the tribulation. No one knew if it was Patriarch Ying Tian who was undergoing the tribulation. Those outside could only sense the terror of the tribulation from the fluctuations after it was launched. The 9 heavens annihilation thunder was launched. The last 1,000 bolts of tribulation lightning were also the most terrifying. As long as Ji Fei could survive under the tribulation lightning, he could continue with the next tribulation. This was just the beginning. Roar. In the valley, Ji Fei bathed in the thunder fire and roared into the sky. The annihilation thunder fire that could destroy everything didn't even burn a strand of his hair. In the next moment, he opened his mouth and sucked, swallowing all the inextinguishable thunder fire on his body. If anyone were to see this scene, they would definitely be dumbfounded. This was the most terrifying annihilation thunder fire. And this guy actually swallowed it. In the entire ancestral realm, probably only a lunatic like Ji Fei would dare to swallow the annihilation thunder fire. Brat, be serious. This is a sovereign heavenly tribulation after all. The disheveled old man's voice came from the sky. Ji Fei didn't think much of it. At this moment, another annihilation thunder fire blasted towards him. This time, he directly opened his mouth and sucked, swallowing the thunder in one gulp. He had the chaos primordial martial body, so he didn't fear the 9 heavens annihilation thunder fire at all. Even if he was struck by this tribulation lightning, he wouldn't be injured at all. Come on, haha. Ji Fei laughed out loud. He was devouring the power of the tribulation. This made the disheveled old man speechless. Since ancient times, he had never seen anyone as crazy as Ji Fei to actually devour the tribulation lightning. One had to know that this was the tribulation lightning. One could die if one wasn't careful. However, Ji Fei wasn't afraid because he had a trump card in hand. The 1,000 bolts of 9 heavens divine lightning that fell from the sky were stronger than the previous one. The aura of destruction filled every inch of the void. There was no sound of thunder. But the entire world was trembling. All the flowers and trees in the valley were smashed by the thunder. Ji Fei was devouring the annihilation thunder fire that fell from the sky in a frenzy. A ball of lightning appeared on his body, and there were Dao patterns that looked like lightning intertwined within the lightning. The unimaginably strong power of the thunder was constantly refined by him, turning it into a part of his own strength. At this moment, the aura that erupted from Ji Fei's body was even stronger. Chapter 3758. At the Primogenitor mountain range, the tribulation clouds covered tens of thousands of miles. At least half of the Primogenitor mountain range was enveloped by the tribulation clouds. The area covered by the tribulation clouds was probably larger than the entire southern region of the Primogenitor realm. If he were to undergo tribulation outside, billions of living beings would probably suffer. Normally, when a peak quasi-supreme expert was about to undergo tribulation, they would enter the depths of the Primogenitor realm to undergo tribulation. This way, the impact on the living beings in the Primogenitor realm would be minimized. Of course, undergoing the tribulation in the Primogenitor mountain range was actually the best choice. This was because one could become the strongest supreme there. However, the prerequisite was that they could successfully undergo the tribulation. Otherwise, it would be a tragedy if they died under the tribulation and ended up having their body and soul destroyed. Since ancient times, many supreme figures in the Primogenitor realm had chosen to undergo tribulation in the Primogenitor mountain range. However, it seemed that no one had ever successfully walked out of the Primogenitor mountain range. When the news that Ying Tian was going to undergo tribulation in the Primogenitor mountain range spread, it shocked the entire Primogenitor realm. One had to know that it was a place where one would almost certainly die. Although one could obtain unparalleled power if they succeeded, it still made countless experts in the Primogenitor realm flinch at the sight of it. No one would be so foolish as to enter the Primogenitor mountain range to undergo tribulation even if they knew that they would die under the tribulation. This was also the reason why the news of Ying Tian undergoing tribulation in the Primogenitor mountain range shook the entire Primogenitor realm. Of course, if Ying Tian was really undergoing tribulation, he definitely wouldn't have chosen to undergo tribulation in the Primogenitor mountain range. At this moment, Ying Tian had long gone into hiding. He didn't dare to show his face. If others found out that he wasn't the one undergoing tribulation, it would be fun. Ying Tian didn't want to die yet. At this moment, he had already received the news that Mu Jinghong had used thunderous means to control the entire Ying Tian sect. His trusted subordinates had almost all been killed by Mu Jinghong. However, no matter how powerful Mu Jinghong was, there would always be a few fish that slipped through the net. Thus, Ying Tian naturally didn't dare to show his face. At that moment, Ji Fei's first wave of extreme path heavenly tribulation had reached its final stage. However, Ji Fei was still able to deal with it with ease. In the valley of the Primogenitor mountain range, Ji Fei stood in the void, only a few dozen feet above the ground. His entire body emitted endless lightning, as if he had turned into a supreme thunder god from the ancient times. The surrounding void was pierced by the lightning bolts that shot out from Ji Yufei's body, and the silent destructive heavenly thunder blasted into the void. Roar! Ji Yufei raised his head and roared into the sky. Lightning bolts that were strong enough to destroy the world burst out from his 7 apertures, while innate Tao patterns of lightning emerged on Ji Yufei's body. Every time a thunder mark exploded, it would be an annihilation electric light. Countless thunder marks kept exploding without making any sound. Ji Yufei's body shook violently, and the immortal Tao power emanating from the sky-blue immortal gold battle robe was blasted away. The immortal gold battle robe was now covered with traces of lightning. This was a supreme immortal battle robe, just one step away from the ultimate leap and becoming an extreme path battle robe. At that moment, the 9 heavenly stars sword in Ji Yufei's hand began to dim, as if the 9 Tao patterns within the sword would be blasted away by the strongest lightning tribulation at any time. 9998. A bolt of lightning fire that connected heaven and earth descended from the sky and was directly swallowed by Ji Yufei. In the next moment, Ji Yufei's primordial chaos body expanded like a balloon. Ji Yufei was shocked. The power of this lightning tribulation was several times stronger than the previous one. If it wasn't for the fact that his martial body was strong enough, his body would have exploded from this destructive power. Although Ji Yufei wouldn't die even if his body exploded, it was inevitable that he would be injured. If he was injured by the heavenly tribulation in the first wave, it would be too embarrassing. Rascal, be more serious. The disheveled old man's voice rang out in Ji Yufei's heart. Preposterous. Ji Yufei circulated the primordial chaos body with all his might, and the terrifying lightning tribulation that he had devoured was immediately refined by him. Rumble. The sound of wind and thunder came from within Ji Yufei's body. His swollen body immediately shrank rapidly, and 9 primordial chaos Tao patterns appeared on his body. In the next moment, his entire body seemed to have become a bottomless black hole, crazily devouring the boundless heavenly lightning power around him. Ji Yufei's cultivation was constantly rising, and a trace of extreme Tao aura was emitted from his body. The entire world shook, as though it was being crushed by this trace of aura. At this time, Ji Yufei could feel that his great Tao was about to be perfected, and the 9 primordial chaos Tao patterns began to show true immortal and perfect martial Tao runes. The 9 primordial chaos Tao patterns began to transform into perfect Tao patterns. Once the transformation was successful, Ji Yufei's great Tao would be perfect, and there would be no more flaws. Extreme Tao was the limit of great Tao, and it represented the extreme of Tao. Since ancient times, there weren't many people who could reach this step in the myriad of worlds. Even the primogenitor realm, the source of the myriad of worlds, didn't have many extreme Tao supremes, and they were all primogenitor level existences in their clan. It had been a long time since anyone dared to take this step in the primogenitor realm. The last time was 10,000 years ago, and there hadn't been anyone who successfully made the final leap in more than 100,000 years. It was imaginable how difficult it was to pass the sovereign heavenly tribulation. At this time, the 9,999 annihilation heavenly lightning came crashing down from the sky. A 9-colored lightning ball that was as huge as a mountain fell from the sky. It was like a 9-colored star formed by interweaving lightning broke through the layers of tribulation clouds and smashed towards the ground. The terrifying and monstrous aura of destruction seemed to crush the entire void of heaven and earth. One could vaguely see a blurry figure in the 9-colored lightning ball, and the extremely terrifying aura of destruction erupted from that figure. What? Why did this thing appear in the first wave of the heavenly tribulation? Ji Yufei looked up at the figure in the lightning ball in the sky. It was a mysterious existence that appeared along with the heavenly tribulation, and it was a mark left on the heavenly Tao by a peerless expert. The heavenly Tao mark could take form and display the strongest attack of the owner of the heavenly Tao mark. Isn't it just a heavenly Tao mark? Come on. Ji Yufei stared at the figure inside the 9-colored thunderball and gripped the 9th heaven star's sword tightly. In the next moment, the 9th heaven star's sword, which had dimmed down, immediately emitted a dazzling sword light, as if a powerful life had been injected into it. Rascal, it's all up to you now. The disheveled old man's voice sounded in Ji Yufei's heart. Obviously, he still didn't intend to help Ji Fei. Chapter 3759. The Heavenly Tao brand had actually appeared in the first wave of the heavenly tribulation. This caused Ji Fei to be extremely shocked. After all, didn't such existences that were almost like living beings only appear in the final stages of the heavenly tribulation? Transcending the heavenly tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range was indeed abnormal. At this time, Ji Fei had no choice but to believe it. The primogenitor's mountain range was indeed strange. However, so what? Let's start conquering the heavenly path. Fight. With a roar, Ji Fei soared into the sky and charged towards the descending ball of nine-colored thunderball. A shocking battle intent erupted from his body. At this time, Ji Fei's domineering aura was shocking. Even the disheveled old man who was controlling the endless killing formation was shocked. This guy didn't act ruthlessly, but once he did, it was earth-shattering. Boom! With a loud bang, Ji Fei directly split open the huge nine-colored thunderball with his sword and killed his way into the thunderball. Then, he pointed his sword at the creature inside the thunderball. To be precise, this was a creature evolved from the mark of the heavenly path. Swoosh! The mysterious creature bathed in the nine-colored thunderball suddenly opened its eyes. Two electric lights directly rushed out from its eyes, directly smashing Ji Fei's sword light and piercing towards Ji Fei. Huh! Ji Fei was shocked. This guy broke his sword with one look. This kind of battle strength was a bit heaven-defying. It seemed like this was going to be a fierce battle. Swoosh! While Ji Fei was shocked, a sharp claw surrounded by electric lights directly grabbed Ji Fei's chest. So fast. In the next moment, Ji Fei's body suddenly became transparent. The electric claw directly scratched into his body, but it was as if it was scratching air. There was no force at all. This was one of the 9 secrets of the immortal path that Ji Fei cultivated, the anti-emptiness secret technique. Body like the void, disappear without a trace. Ji Fei merged with the surrounding void and disappeared without a trace. The mysterious creature shuddered, and countless 9-colored bolts of lightning shot out of its body, instantly piercing the surrounding void into a sieve. No one could use invisibility to hide from such a terrifying attack. The 9-colored lightning surging out of the mysterious creature's body were like countless 9-colored dragons and snakes, dancing wildly in the void of the lightning ball without dispersing. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be able to dodge the mysterious creature's lightning attack. However, this person was Ji Fei. Ji Fei cultivated the 9 esoteric immortal Tao, a paragon immortal art. Given his current cultivation base, he had already cultivated the 9 esoteric immortal Tao to an extremely high level. Even if this mysterious creature directly shattered the void, it would not be able to force Ji Fei out. Swoosh! In the next instant, Ji Fei appeared behind the mysterious creature, raised his sword, and cut the creature in half. The creature disappeared in the void, and at the same time, Ji Fei felt an extremely powerful life force surge into his body. In the next instant, his entire body was filled with power. Even the sky-blue immortal gold battle robe on his body glowed with immortal light again, bursting with the most dazzling immortal light. The countless marks left by the lightning on the sky-blue immortal gold battle robe also disappeared. Ji Fei realized that the 9 heavenly stars sword in his hand also had a special aura, as if a new life was about to be born in the sword. At this moment, the huge 9-colored lightning ball disappeared, and a divine light transformed into a mark that shot into the sky. It rushed into the tribulation clouds and disappeared. Although it was said that the heavenly tribulation could destroy everything, it would leave the person undergoing the tribulation with a chance of survival. After killing the mysterious creature, Ji Fei obtained a strong life force. This life force could directly heal the injured body of the person undergoing the tribulation, but Ji Fei was not injured. This life force allowed him to recover instantly. Be careful, the last lightning tribulation is coming. Just as Ji Fei was in shock, the disheveled old man's voice rang out in his mind. What? When Ji Fei heard this, he raised his head and saw a shocking scene. He saw an unimaginably terrifying figure walk down from the tribulation clouds. An extreme aura surged from this figure. With every step he took, the entire world shook, as if he could shatter the void and destroy the world at any time. Extreme lightning, Reverend. When Ji Yufei saw this figure, no matter how firm his Dao heart was, he could not help but be shocked. It seemed that the mysterious creature was just a lackey of the Supreme Lightning Ancestor. At this moment, a thundercloud appeared behind the Supreme Lightning Ancestor. In the next moment, the Supreme Existence waved his hand, and countless experts of the Lightning Dao rushed out from the thundercloud. Shocking battle cries rang out in the void. This was an army made up of countless experts of the Lightning Ancestor. When Ji Yufei saw this scene, he could not help but be shocked. Since ancient times, there had been countless people who cultivated the Lightning Dao in the primogenitor's realm. There were also countless people who had left their marks on the heavenly path. However, what made Ji Yufei's scalp go numb was that the Supreme Lightning Ancestor could actually control the marks left by the experts of the Lightning Dao on the heavenly path. When Ji Yufei saw countless experts of the Lightning Dao charging towards him, he could not help but feel his scalp go numb even with the protection of the sky-blue immortal golden battle armor. He swung his sword and cut off a strand of hair. Then, he grabbed it in his hand and threw it into his mouth, chewing it, and then spat it at the experts of the Lightning Dao. In the next moment, as Ji Yufei spat out a mouthful of hair, countless figures appeared in the void and turned into countless copies of himself. Then, they charged towards the experts of the Lightning Dao. At Ji Yufei's level of cultivation, even a strand of hair could become a clone of himself. When he spat out a mouthful of hair, countless Ji Yufei appeared in the void in front of him. Each of the Ji Yufei gave off an extremely powerful energy fluctuation. The army of Ji Yufei collided with the countless experts of the Lightning Dao. It was as if two armies were really fighting. This scene was incomparably realistic. The fierce battle was extremely bloody. At this time, Ji Yufei faced the Supreme Lightning Ancestor. The Supreme Lightning Ancestor emitted an extremely ancient and vicissitude aura, as if he had existed since time immemorial. He was an ancient god. Facing such an opponent, even Ji Yufei did not dare to be negligent. His expression was extremely solemn as he stared at the terrifying figure in front of him. The figure of the Supreme Lightning Ancestor was also staring at Ji Yufei. The aura of the extreme path was vast and mighty, and he could launch a fatal blow at Ji Yufei at any time. Chapter 3760. Ji Yufei triggered his supreme heavenly tribulation in a valley in the primogenitor mountain range. He encountered great trouble during the first wave of the tribulation. He never imagined that a heaven-defying existence like the heavenly Dao brand would appear at the end of the first wave of the nine heavens annihilating thunder tribulation. It was an incomparably ancient heavenly Dao brand. Its owner was definitely a super antique and a lightning Dao supremacy. Lightning represented destruction. The lightning Dao supremacy was naturally a terrifying destroyer. Its huge body exuded an aura of destruction that made even Ji Yufei's heart palpitate. At this time, countless figures were fighting desperately under the tribulation clouds. Ji Yufei chewed on his hair and spat it out. The broken hair instantly turned into countless Ji Yufeis and clashed with the ThunderClan's army formed from the countless Lightning Dao Supremacy's subordinates. For a moment, it was hard to tell who would come out on top. The Ji Yufei's army blocked the ThunderClan's army. Ji Yufei and the Supreme Lightning Ancestor faced each other across the sky. Their auras were constantly rising. Ji Yufei didn't dare to be negligent. The guy opposite him was formed from the great Dao brand left behind by the Lightning Dao supremacy countless years ago. It represented the strongest power of this lightning tribulation. Only by defeating this ancient Lightning Dao supremacy could he survive the first wave of the tribulation. Ji Yufei really didn't think that the power of the tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range would become so powerful and terrifying. But so what? Kill. Ji Yufei took the initiative to attack. With a furious roar, his voice was like a sudden clap of thunder. At the same time, his right hand had already slammed towards the sovereign of lightning's imprint. A giant primordial chaos hand appeared in front of Ji Yufei's palm. Endless primordial chaos force erupted from the giant hand. Wherever the giant primordial chaos hand passed, The figures formed from the Great Tao brand of the Thunder Clan's powerhouses collapsed one after another. They turned into brand again and soared into the sky, returning to the heavenly Tao. Some comparatively weaker Grand Tao brands even directly collapsed into pieces in space, and they completely dispersed and were unable to return to the Heaven Tao. The Great Tao imprint was not eternal, and the power of the Great Tao imprint was not limitless. After this battle, the Thunder Tao experts in the primogenitor realm who had yet to pass their heavenly tribulations were overjoyed. The chaotic primordial hand that Ji Fei had unleashed was like a chaotic divine mountain crushing down. The great path imprints of countless cultivators of the Way of Thunder crumbled one after another. His first move was the heaven-covering palm. At this time, the terrifying figure on the other side also made a move. 9 balls of lightning directly rushed out from the figure, bombarding towards Ji Fei. Boom! The first ball of thunder directly collided with Ji Fei's primordial chaos palm. The ball of thunder exploded, and endless thunder patterns erupted. Each of the thunder patterns radiated with destructive power. Ji Fei's primordial chaos hand paused for a moment. Boom boom boom, earth-shattering explosions rang out continuously. With every explosion, the entire space shook as if it was about to collapse. Even a portion of the tribulation clouds in the sky was dispersed. The power displayed by Ji Fei's heaven-covering palm was very strong. It directly blocked the 9 balls of lightning. However, the moment the 9th ball of lightning exploded, his heaven-covering palm also dissipated. The confrontation between Ji Fei and the incarnation of the Thunder Tao Sovereign was actually evenly matched. No one had the upper hand. However, at this moment, a bolt of lightning silently broke through the void and directly blasted onto Ji Fei's body. In the next moment, Ji Fei only felt his body tremble, and he was directly sent flying. Countless bolts of lightning directly rushed out from the incarnation of the Thunder Tao Sovereign. They were like countless tentacles, bombarding the flying Ji Fei. Buzz! In the next moment, the 9 heavenly stars sword in Ji Fei's hand let out a crisp sword cry. Then, Ji Fei swung the 9 heavenly stars sword in his hand fiercely. 9 rays of sword light immediately rushed out from the 9 heavenly stars sword in his hand. A terrifying murderous aura suddenly appeared between the heavens and the earth, causing the entire world to lose its color. Ji Fei displayed the 9 heaven punishing swords. This was the supreme sword Tao divine ability. When cultivated to the highest realm, a single slash could destroy a region. Although Ji Fei had yet to cultivate the 9 heaven punishing swords to the final realm, the power displayed by this slash was shocking. The 9 rays of sword light emitting a monstrous murderous aura directly destroyed the countless bolts of lightning and directly slashed at the body of the Thunder Tao Sovereign. Wherever the sword light passed, it seemed to be able to cut through everything. This was the power of the 9 heaven punishing swords, known to be able to cut through the heavens with a single slash. The Thunder Clan Sovereign's incarnation was also extremely powerful. The 9 rays of sword light of annihilation penetrated his body, unable to harm him in the slightest. It was as if he had become one with the surrounding lightning. Ji Fei was taken aback. At the same time, the figure instantly closed in on him. With a huge hand, it directly grabbed at Yi Futian's head at an extremely fast speed. Ji Fei only had time to reach out with his right hand and directly met the figure's hand. He was using the secret word none of the 9 secrets of the immortal path. The moment the hand of the Thunder Tao Sovereign's incarnation touched Ji Fei's hand, it instantly turned into nothingness. The power of the secret word none instantly enveloped the Thunder Tao Sovereign's incarnation. In the next moment, the endless lightning emitted by the Thunder Tao Sovereign's incarnation suddenly dimmed. The endless power of the lightning was turned into nothingness by Ji Fei's secret word none. Primordial Spirit Sword of the Way. Ji Fei did not stop. With a roar, he used another of the 9 secrets of the immortal path. A figure rushed out of his forehead and turned into a sword shadow. With a flash, the sword shadow actually cut off the head of the Extreme Lightning Ancestor's incarnation. Ji Fei's 9 sky punishing swords had not been able to harm the Extreme Lightning Ancestor's incarnation at all. He did not expect the primordial spirit sword of the way to be able to harm the incarnation. This was truly a case of one thing conquering another. Gu Fei's primordial spirit sword of the way specialized in cutting the opponent's primordial spirit. This imprint of the Great Tao was actually a different kind of primordial spirit imprint. The Extreme Lightning Ancestor's incarnation was not defeated just like that. His figure dissipated in the void, but in the next moment, endless lightning gathered. A figure appeared before Gu Fei once again. This person was the Extreme Lightning Ancestor's incarnation. Although the Extreme Lightning Ancestor's incarnation did not return to the heavenly path, his battle prowess was much weaker after being slashed by Gu Fei's sword. Again, Gu Fei's battle intent surged as he directly charged at the Extreme Lightning Ancestor. Chapter 3761. High up in the sky, beneath the tribulation clouds, Gu Fei battled the Extreme Lightning Ancestor. The two figures fought in the sky, shaking the entire world. Powerful energy waves spread out in all directions, terrifying to the extreme. The tribulation clouds in the sky tumbled violently, as if something was about to rush out of them. Boom! Bam! Muffled sounds of collisions kept ringing out as Gu Fei was blasted away. His entire body was enveloped by 9-colored lightning, but with a shake of his body, the lightning enveloping him was immediately shaken off. At the same time, the lightning-shaped spear stabbed straight at Gu Fei's forehead. In an instant, it was less than half a foot away from Gu Fei's forehead. So fast. Gu Fei was secretly shocked. In the next moment, his body suddenly became transparent, and the spear's spearhead pierced right through his forehead. It was as if it was stabbing the air, without any point of impact. At the same time, Gu Fei pounced forward and directly hugged the Supreme Incarnation. In the next moment, the incarnation of the Extreme Lightning Ancestor was directly devoured by his divine body. Gu Fei desperately operated the Returning Truth secret technique, one of the 9 secrets of the Immortal Path. The power of the Way of Thunder that was devoured into his body was turned into the most primitive spiritual energy of the world, which was then devoured by him, becoming a part of his own power. However, the power of the Way of Thunder was too powerful. Even if Gu Fei frantically operated the Returning Truth secret technique, he would not be able to completely refine such a huge amount of power in a short time. At that moment, Gu Fei seemed to have turned into a supreme Way of Thunder. Blinding lightning constantly rushed out of his 7 orifices, and the power of the Way of Thunder kept rampaging in his body. His flesh and bones were destroyed by the powerful power of the Way of Thunder, only to be reborn again. Gu Fei's primordial chaos body was constantly transforming, becoming more and more powerful. His flesh and bones were constantly smelting the immortal power of the Way of Thunder from the heavenly tribulation. Gu Fei was the only one who dared to use the power of tribulation lightning to temper his body. After the Lightning Tao Sovereign's incarnation was devoured by Gu Fei, it did not return to the heavenly Tao. Instead, it wanted to rush out from Gu Fei's body. Gu Fei sat cross-legged in the void. 9 primordial chaos Tao seals rushed out of his body and imprinted themselves on his body, sealing the Extreme Thunder Ancestor incarnation in his body. The power of the 9 secrets of the Immortal Tao erupted at full force, the secret art of none and the secret art of returning truth. These 2 secret arts circulated wildly. A figure kept struggling on Gu Fei's body. It wanted to rush out, but it was sealed by the 9 chaos primordial Tao seals. It couldn't rush out at all. Brat, well done, haha. At that moment, the disheveled old man's voice rang out in Gu Fei's mind. How could Gu Fei have the time to pay attention to this guy at a time like this? Several hours passed, and Gu Fei fought to the death with the Extreme Thunder Ancestor's incarnation sealed in his body. He almost let the incarnation break out of his body several times. The tribulation clouds shrouded the entire area. At that moment, the people outside were shocked. There was suddenly no powerful aura coming from the area shrouded by the tribulation clouds. No one knew who was injured and who was defeated. At that moment, the battle between Gu Fei's army and the Lightning Tao Sovereign's army had reached a climax. After the Extreme Thunder Ancestor's incarnation was devoured by Gu Fei, the Lightning Tao Sovereign's camp began to show signs of defeat. Soon, the Lightning Tao Sovereign's camp was routed without any warning. Ji Fei's army pursued and sent these guys back to the heavenly path. Some of the Lightning Dao sovereign's imprints were already very weak. As long as they were defeated, the imprints would shatter in the void and disappear completely. After another half a day, Ji Fei finally refined the Extreme Thunder Ancestor's incarnation. This time, endless divine light descended from the sky. As he bathed in the divine light, an unbelievably powerful life force poured into his body. Ji Fei felt as if the heavenly voice was ringing in his ears. The next moment, Ji Fei felt that the bottleneck of his cultivation had finally loosened. He was about to take that step. Ji Fei passed the first wave of sovereign heavenly tribulation. The moment Ji Fei refined the Extreme Thunder Ancestor's incarnation, the second wave of sovereign heavenly tribulation began. The next moment, towering divine flames rushed out of the ground and enveloped Ji Fei. Before Ji Fei could rejoice, he found himself in the sea of flames. Of course, given his cultivation, the divine flames that came out of the ground could not hurt him at all. Earth fire. To think that it's earth fire. The disheveled old man's voice sounded once more. Heavenly thunder and earthly fire. Ji Fei, who was trapped in the sea of flames, was extremely frustrated. To think that the second wave of sovereign heavenly tribulation would be the earthly fire heavenly tribulation. What's going on? Ji Fei did not know why this was happening either. These were all extremely powerful heavenly tribulations. If this was the case from the start, wouldn't the third and fourth waves be even more terrifying? I've said it before. This place is different from other places. The chances of success for sovereign heavenly tribulations here are very slim. The disheveled old man said. At this moment, fiery patterns of the great Tao began to appear within the divine flames. The power of the divine flames instantly increased by several times, causing the void to distort from the heat. Ji Fei decided to sit cross-legged in the void again. He circulated his mystic arts and frantically devoured the surrounding essence qi of heaven and earth. The 9 heaven stars sword in his hand shone brilliantly in the divine flames. After being tempered by the divine flames, the extreme Tao aura emanating from the 9 heaven stars sword became even stronger. At this moment, the sky blue immortal golden battle robe that Ji Fei was wearing was also gradually transforming. Be it the 9 heaven stars sword or the sky blue immortal golden battle robe, they both had the chance to break through to the extreme Tao realm and become extreme Tao weapons. Rumble. At this moment, the heaven and earth shook. An almost transparent divine flame rose from the ground. The power of this divine flame was clearly much stronger than before. There were many types of fire in the world. The carnate true fire was one of the strongest types of fire. There were also the lunar fire, purple yang fire, etc. At this moment, the almost transparent divine flame was the carnate true fire. The terrifying carnate true fire could smelt almost everything in the world, but it could not smelt anything that was imperishable. Ji Fei remained motionless, allowing the carnate true fire to burn his body. He was even using the power of the carnate true fire to temper his martial body in a frenzy. This was too crazy. If others were to find out, they would definitely fall to the ground in shock. This fire tribulation was something that everyone would be lucky to avoid. However, Ji Fei did not avoid it. Instead, he invited the fire onto himself. It was also because of Ji Fei's craziness that his martial body was as strong as a Tao weapon in human form. It could directly go against a true Tao weapon. This was the advantage of a warrior and also the confidence of a warrior. They could ignore Tao weapons because they themselves were stronger than Tao weapons. Chapter 3762. A genius in a second. Remember to go away. Shaw Net, providing you with wonderful novel reading. It was no secret that a martial artist had a powerful martial body. In the past, the extreme-grade martial ancestor could definitely use his martial body to fight against an extreme-grade Tao weapon. It was not an easy task to cultivate the extreme path martial body. Meanwhile, in a valley in the Primogenitor mountain range, the second wave of Ji Fei's sovereign heavenly tribulation finally began. After the heavenly lightning, it was the earth fire. The power of heaven and earth was not something that mortals could resist. If one wanted to obtain great power, He would have to break through all the shackles and obstacles to achieve the ultimate leap. Gu Feipan stood in the void. He was actually attracting the fire to burn his body. He was not like other cultivators who directly blocked the earth fire that was burning towards them. At this moment, the tribulation cloud shrouded the void. Under the tribulation cloud, the laws of heaven and earth were extremely chaotic. Even the divine sense of an extreme grade supremacy would be obliterated if it entered the range of the heavenly tribulation. This was why even an extreme grade supremacy could not detect the situation of Gu Fei's tribulation. Everyone could only watch from the outside, but they could not see anything. They could only feel the various fluctuations of power coming from the heavenly tribulation. This ancestor Yingtian is simply courting death. Someone said gloatingly. He, since this ancestor Yingtian dared to come here to undergo the tribulation, he must be confident. Someone expressed a different view. After all, the ancestor Yingtian was the founder of the Yingtian sect. Such an existence would naturally not be stupid enough to court death. Mph will know soon enough if he can do it. Some people who had a grudge against the ancestor Yingtian naturally wanted to see the ancestor Yingtian suffer. Outside the heavenly tribulation, more than a dozen powerful figures stood quietly in the void. The aura emitted from the blurry figures shocked everyone. Everyone stayed far away from the figures, not daring to get close. These guys were not real extreme grade supremacies, but the divine sense incarnations of an extreme grade supremacy. Even a divine sense incarnation could suppress the ages. Everyone was waiting. After all, the success rate of undergoing the tribulation in the primogenitor mountain range was basically zero. Most people thought that it was only a matter of time before ancestor Yingtian died. Although he had withstood the first wave of the tribulation, it didn't mean that he could withstand the second wave. There were a total of 9 waves of extreme path heavenly tribulation. The further one went, the more powerful and monstrous the heavenly tribulation would be. Some people described it as the 9 heavens that needed to be broken through to become an extreme path sovereign. Each wave of heavenly tribulation was a heavenly tribulation. Only by truly breaking through the 9 heavens could one become an extreme path sovereign. At this time, Gu Fei had already broken through the first heaven, and the earth fire was the second heaven. At this time, the almost transparent earth fire engulfed him. The core temperature of the earth fire was so high that it could even melt immortal materials. The consequence of Gu Fei drawing the fire into his body was that his flesh, blood, tendons, and bones were all burned into clear air, dissipating into the void. Love Go Small Say Netk, he watched helplessly as his hair, skin, and flesh melted in the almost transparent earth fire. This was absolutely terrifying to the extreme. The pain that came from his body almost drove Gu Fei crazy. It almost exceeded the limit that Gu Fei could bear. This was also a kind of training, an extreme kind of training. The terrifying earth fire even burned into Gu Fei's bones, igniting his marrow. The sovereign heavenly tribulation was constantly changing, and the power of the earth fire was constantly increasing. Gu Fei's entire body was left sitting cross-legged in the endless earth fire. The earth fire was burning, and the almost transparent earth fire lasted for an hour before receding. However, another kind of earth fire emerged from the ground. Black lotuses rushed out of the ground and flew towards Gu Fei. These weren't real black lotuses, but the transformation of the extreme yin black flame. This extreme yin black flame was also a kind of earth fire, and the source of the extreme yin black flame was the legendary 9 underworlds. However, this was only a legend. No one knew where the source of the extreme yin black flame was, not even the primogenitor of the Black Flame clan in the ancestral god realm. The black lotuses formed by the black flames directly entered Gu Fei's bones. Gu Fei's bones emitted endless primal chaos Dao patterns, but at this time, these powerful Dao patterns couldn't stop the black lotuses. The black lotuses entered his bones and burned his marrow. At this moment, the primordial spirit fire in Gu Fei's skull was violently beating. No one knew what kind of pain Gu Fei was enduring. This kind of torture could make a quasi-supreme go crazy, but Gu Fei was silently enduring it. The extreme yin black flame wasn't able to burn Gu Fei's bones. The primal chaos chi was vast and mighty on his bones, and endless primal chaos Tao patterns were interweaving. The Tao patterns imprinted on his bones were all awakened, and they were all emitting the primal chaos power of the great Tao. The extreme yin-black flame didn't just bring destruction, it also brought a trace of heaven and earth Tao rhythm. This kind of Tao rhythm couldn't be cultivated by cultivators, and could only be obtained through tribulation. This was also the reason why when a cultivator reached a certain cultivation realm, heaven and earth would send down a heavenly tribulation. This was the reaction between the cultivator's great Tao and the heavenly Tao. A cultivator's Tao had to fuse with the heavenly Tao in order to achieve a leap in Tao. Therefore, humans and heaven and earth were existences that complemented each other. Any being above the immortal realm would understand this logic. However, it was hard to say who would be able to truly grasp this profound meaning. At this time, the heavenly Tao was supplementing Gu Fei's great Tao, and Gu Fei's great Tao was gradually transforming towards perfection. An hour later, the extreme yin-black flame receded, and fine cracks appeared on Gu Fei's bones, as though they could shatter at any time. This wasn't a good thing for Gu Fei. The next moment, the primal chaos power erupted from within Gu Fei's bones, and the cracks on his bones disappeared rapidly, being repaired by the primal chaos power. Rumble. The ground was sinking, and at this time, a fire dragon rushed out of the ground and swallowed Gu Fei, who was sitting cross-legged in the void. At this time, the disheveled old man, who was guarding at the side, was shocked. He didn't expect the sovereign heavenly tribulation to be this sick. That fire dragon was extremely powerful, and after swallowing Gu Fei, it actually crashed into the void. Boom! A loud sound rang out, and the entire heaven and earth shook. The void that seemed empty was immediately filled with countless array patterns. The array patterns intertwined, forming a shocking array that blocked the fire dragon. *CK, I have to make a move. The disheveled old man didn't show himself, but he couldn't let the fire dragon take Gu Fei away. If he left this valley that was filled with arrays, the chances of Gu Fei successfully transcending the tribulation would be slim. You have the fire dragon, and I have the dragon slayer saber. Saber, come. As the disheveled old man shouted, an immortal saber light flew over from afar. With a flash of the saber light, a huge dragon head flew up. Chapter 3763. Genius in a second. Remember, love, go away. The web provides you with exciting novels to read. Slaughtering a dragon with a single slash. This scene was absolutely shocking. However, apart from the disheveled old man, no one else could witness this scene. The blade light summoned by the disheveled old man was actually a peerless ominous blade. Once this ominous blade was unleashed, even a real fire dragon would be slain in a single slash, let alone a fire dragon formed from a great Tao imprint. That fire dragon actually dissipated in the void after being slashed by the ominous blade. It turned into a dim great Tao imprint that soared into the sky and disappeared into the dark void. After the fire dragon disappeared, a ball of primordial spirit light appeared in the void, emitting endless divine light that illuminated the entire world. Around the primordial spirit light, boundless primordial chaos chi surged. Primordial chaos Tao patterns appeared indistinctly within the primordial chaos chi. Gu Fei's skeletal body had already disappeared, leaving only a ball of primordial spirit light. As the fire dragon was slain, the great Tao imprint returned to the heavenly Tao. The earthly fire tribulation disappeared and the blade light formed by the ominous blade flew back. At this time, the third wave of the heavenly tribulation had yet to be launched. Gu Fei took this opportunity to reconstruct his physical body. Within the boundless primordial chaos chi, a skeletal body appeared. This was the carnate chaotic primordial martial body that was formed directly from the primordial chaos chi. When the skeletal body appeared, flesh and blood began to grow. Soon, a domineering figure appeared under the tribulation clouds. Reconstructing his physical body only took a few breaths of time. To Gu Fei, this was too easy. At this time, his black hair fluttered in the wind, his eyes were like cold stars, and his slender body was absolutely perfect. At this time, Gu Fei was filled with a feeling of strength from head to toe. Just as Gu Fei finished reconstructing his physical body and martial body, A despairing aura of destruction descended from the tribulation clouds in the sky. Then, in the silent world, a gust of wind blew. That's right, it was wind. Rascal, be careful. This is the wind tribulation. The disheveled old man's voice sounded in Jiu Fei's heart. What? Wind tribulation? Jiu Fei was startled. What was going on? Heavenly tribulations were usually lightning tribulations, but wind tribulations were rarely seen. Wind was formless and traceless. It could not be seen, but it could be felt. At this moment, Jiu Fei felt a chill run down his spine. He only felt a gentle breeze blowing over, but in the next moment, the martial body that he had just reconstructed collapsed in the void and turned into a bloody mist. In the next moment, the blood mist was blown away into the void, leaving behind only a ball of primordial spirit light. How is this possible? No one knew better than Jiu Fei how powerful his reconstructed martial body was. It was several times more powerful than the martial body that had been burned into nothingness by the earth fire. However, even such a powerful martial body was blown into a bloody mist by a gentle breeze. How was this possible? Be careful not to get your soul blown away, the disheveled old man reminded. He did not want to fight every single time. After all, it was impossible for one to become an invincible supreme being without the tempering of the heavenly tribulation. The disheveled old man would only fight at the most critical moment. At this moment, a gentle breeze lingered around Jiu Fei's primordial spirit light. This was probably the most terrifying breeze in the world. The inconspicuous wind was actually so powerful. This was something that Jiu Fei could not imagine before this. The wind tribulation was fully activated. The primordial chaos energy that was emanating from Jiu Fei's primordial spirit light was constantly blown away by the gentle breeze. Even the void sealed by the 9 primordial chaos Dao runes could not completely block this wind force. Jiu Fei's primordial spirit was trembling. This was something that had never happened before. Even the previous 2 waves of the heavenly tribulation could not truly shake his primordial spirit. However, it was different this time. The power of the wind tribulation could actually threaten his primordial spirit. It seemed like the real show was about to begin. Ordinary peak quasi-supreme beings might not even be able to withstand the first wave of the heavenly tribulation. They would not be struck by the heavenly tribulation and perish in body and soul. One had to know that this was the primogenitor mountain range. The power of the heavenly tribulation would be even stronger here. Jiu Fei defended with all his might. However, his primordial spirit light was still gradually dimming. It was constantly being worn down by the power of the wind tribulation. If it had been an ordinary quasi-supreme, they would have long been destroyed by the wind tribulation. Jiu Fei was still persevering. He would not die so easily. No one was willing to die. Jiu Fei still had many things to do, so he was even more unwilling to die. The 9 secrets of the immortal Tao was a life-saving method. To him, all the divine abilities and secret techniques created by other supreme beings were just life-saving methods. These weren't divine abilities or secret techniques that belonged to him. Jiu Fei was very ambitious. He wanted to smelt the myriad Taos and sublimate them to the extreme. He wanted to create his own extreme battle techniques and divine abilities. Boom! In the next moment, Jiu Fei's primordial spirit light suddenly shone brightly. 9 primordial chaos Dao seals rushed out of the primordial spirit light and obliterated the surroundings. The power of the wind tribulation around him was dispelled. However, an even stronger gust of wind descended from the sky and instantly enveloped Jiu Fei's primordial spirit light. The originally powerful primordial spirit light dimmed once again. This time, the wind roared. A blurry figure appeared in the void. It disappeared and appeared at times like the wind, drifting erratically. Even Jiu Fei could not sense the existence of this figure, let alone where it would appear in the next moment. It was definitely not an easy task to destroy the figure formed by the great Tao imprints. The 3rd wave of the heavenly tribulation would not disappear until it was destroyed. This was definitely not a good thing for Jiu Fei. Kill. A soul will rippled from Jiu Fei's primordial spirit light. In the next moment, endless primordial chaos chi surged violently. 9 blurry figures appeared in the primordial chaos chi. The 9 figures directly charged towards the erratic figure. Murderous intent was earth-shattering. The 9 figures directly forced the mysterious figure into a corner and were about to kill him. However, a breeze blew in the next moment and the 9 figures directly dissipated in the void. They had actually broken through his secret technique in an instant. Afterwards, he used the nothing character of the 9 secrets of immortals without even thinking. The power of the nothing character was extremely great. It could turn anything tangible or intangible into nothingness. The wind of tribulation that swept towards Gu Fei's primordial spirit completely dissipated in the void, turning into nothingness. At that moment, Gu Fei's martial body was reconstructed once again. His powerful figure stood there, radiating an overbearing aura. The world seemed to pale in comparison. However, the power of the invisible wind tribulation kept increasing, as if it was endless. It shocked Gu Fei. Chapter 3764. Genius 1 second remember love go away. To provide you with exciting novels to read. The wind tribulation was formless and traceless. When the person undergoing the tribulation sensed the existence of the wind, it was already too late. They would be destroyed by the power of the wind tribulation. Gu Fei's chaotic primordial martial physique was extremely powerful. Even if he was attacked by the power of the wind tribulation, he could still withstand it and wouldn't be destroyed. What Gu Fei had to deal with was the blurry figure that appeared in the wind tribulation. It was an unfathomable living being formed by the mark of the great Tao. This living being was definitely not the peerless wind god in the legends of the human world and heavenly world. It was the most ancient living being in the ancestral realm. This living being cultivated the great Tao of wind and grasped the perfect profundity of the power of wind. This kind of existence could be tangible or intangible, making it impossible to guard against. In the ancestral realm, the most terrifying wind tribulation was the one that triggered the mark that this ancient living being had left on the heavenly Tao. Once the mark of the heavenly Tao of this ancient creature was touched, only death awaited those cultivators who cultivated the great Tao of wind. It seemed that no one had ever survived. This living being was the ancestor of the Wind clan that had disappeared for countless years in the ancestral realm, the Wind Sovereign. However, in the current ancestral realm, the Wind clan had already become a thing of the past. This clan had completely disappeared in the long river of time. If the Wind Sovereign was still in the ancestral realm, the mark that he had left on the heavenly Tao would probably be much more powerful. Gu Fei would probably be in trouble. At this moment, Gu Fei had already reconstructed his martial body. Powerful waves of chaotic primordial force erupted from his body, causing the surrounding void to tremble. Boom! Gu Fei suddenly slapped forward without any warning. With a muffled sound, an almost transparent figure was forced back by Gu Fei's palm. The mysterious living being in the wind tribulation was making a move. Be careful. This fella is equivalent to the incarnation of the Wind Sovereign. Once you kill this fella, the wind tribulation will naturally disperse. The disheveled old man's voice resounded in Gu Fei's heart. Then why aren't you helping me kill him? Gu Fei roared at the sky. This god of the mountain and river cauldron was just a mouth cannon. He was all talk and no action. This guy was probably waiting until I was about to die before he made a move. Even though Gu Fei was filled with resentment, he knew that the disheveled old man was doing this for his own good. He wanted him to be tempered by the heavenly tribulation. Once he made the final leap and became an extreme supremacy, he would possess even greater power. Great power was not easy to obtain. Gu Fei had already passed the thunder tribulation. Not only did the heavenly thunder bring about destruction, but it also contained the Tao of immortality that he had grasped and comprehended. The profound meaning of the thunder Tao was evolving in his primordial spirit, gradually turning into a thunder mark. In addition to the thunder mark, Gu Fei's primordial spirit was also branded with a fire mark, a fire Tao mark. This kind of immortal Tao mark represented the pinnacle of Tao, and it was brought to Gu Fei by the heavenly tribulation. At this moment, he had also captured the Tao of Wind Tao. This Tao of Wind was corroborated with his own Tao, and a wind mark was about to take shape in his primordial spirit. Of course, only when Ji Yufei completely defeated the Wind Clan ancestors' Heaven Dao mark could he truly cultivate the Wind Dao mark and grasp the power of wind. At this moment, Ji Yufei's spiritual will was fully released. Within a radius of 3,000 feet, his spiritual will was like liquid water, rippling in the void, and could even be seen with the naked eye. Such a powerful spiritual will only enveloped a radius of 3,000 feet with Ji Yufei as the center. The spiritual will was extremely concentrated, and even the figure formed by the Wind Clan ancestors' Heaven Dao mark couldn't escape the detection of Ji Yufei's spiritual will. This also meant that the ancient and dangerous Wind Clan ancestors' Heaven Dao incarnation was only 3,000 feet away from Ji Yufei. For a moment, it didn't attack Ji Yufei. The Heaven Dao incarnation had its master's battle skills and experience. Ji Yufei was fighting with the Wind Clan ancestor, and this was a different kind of battle. If Ji Yufei lost this battle, then he would die, and there was nothing more to say. If other people encountered the Wind Clan ancestors' Heaven Dao incarnation, they would have lost all hope. However, Ji Yufei wasn't someone who believed in heresy. He firmly believed that he could crush his opponents, even if his opponent was the Heaven Dao. If he didn't have the confidence of an expert, Ji Yufei definitely wouldn't be able to reach this step. Kill. Ji Yufei let out a furious roar as he charged forward. An expert should advance courageously and destroy everything that stood in his way. At this moment, Ji Yufei used the 5 elemental fist that he had created. The power of the 5 elements immediately gathered on his fists. As he punched out, boundless divine fire immediately rushed out from his fists, instantly enveloping the entire sky in front of him. Towering divine fire appeared in the sky, burning half the sky red. The void that was enveloped by the divine fire was burned until it was distorted. The fire elemental power that erupted from Ji Yufei's punch actually included the power of the fire runes that he had gathered when he went through the divine tribulation. In the sea of fire, a figure was moving quickly. Ji Yufei sneered. His glabella suddenly opened, and in the next moment, a bolt of lightning rushed out from it, bombarding the figure in the sea of fire. The mysterious figure was almost transparent, but in the sea of fire, it had to reveal itself. The figure had to retreat. That was the power of lightning. If it were to be hit, even the Heaven Dao incarnation would suffer a great impact. Moreover, even if the ancestor of the Feng clan did not disappear and came in person, it would be impossible to break through the layers of killing formations that the disheveled old man had set up in a short time. Ji Yufei had the world's fastest movement technique, the Desolate Steps. With his current level of cultivation, he could cross millions of miles in an instant with a single step. This speed was even faster than teleportation portals. It should be noted that teleportation portals needed to be activated, but Ji Yufei could take a step at any time. Ji Yufei appeared next to the almost transparent figure in an instant. He extended his hand, and a suction force that seemed to devour the sky enveloped the figure. However, in the next moment, the figure disappeared, as if it had suddenly melted into the void around it. Its aura also disappeared without a trace. Good heavens! Ji Yufei could not help but be moved. In the next moment, the power of his divine will erupted, and his powerful divine will spread in all directions. Countless faint, unsubstantial figures seemed to appear in the void. This was the manifestation of divine will. The entire valley was like a ripple that spread out in all directions. Wherever it passed, there was nothing that could hide. Die! Ji Yufei let out a furious roar and pounced forward. Violent energy spread out in all directions. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at the mysterious figure. However, in the next moment, pitch-black spatial cracks appeared in the void. Every crack was as thin as a strand of hair. Ji Yufei was shocked. He did not dare to delay. In the next moment, powerful Dao patterns rushed out from the sky-blue immortal gold armor he was wearing. The Dao patterns that rushed out from the sky-blue immortal gold armor imprinted themselves forward and blocked the invisible wind blades. However, at this moment, he felt a chill on his neck. Then, his head fell off. This shocked Ji Yufei to an unimaginable level. In the next moment, his head and body exploded, turning into a mist of blood. This The Wind Clan ancestor's embodiment of heavenly Tao, who was hiding in the void, was shocked. At this moment, even the sky-blue immortal gold armor Jiyu Fei was wearing was torn apart. The 9 heavenly stars sword in his hand was also broken into several pieces, turning into scrap metal. In the next moment, the mist of blood suddenly shrunk. Then, a figure appeared in the boundless bloody light. An even more powerful aura than before exploded from Jiyu Fei's body. Every time he was blasted into a mist of blood by the power of the heavenly tribulation, the reconstructed martial body would be much more powerful than before. This was Jiyu Fei's trump card. The wind tribulation was still wreaking havoc. However, this time, Jiyu Fei learned his lesson and did not let the power of the wind get close to him. He waved his hand and the broken sky-blue immortal gold armor flew back to him. He put it on, and the broken armor once again glowed with great vitality. The broken armor quickly repaired itself. Soon, a perfect sky-blue immortal gold armor appeared on Jiyu Fei's body, emitting an immortal aura. Jiyu Fei's 9 heavenly stars sword was the same. The scrap metal regained its immortal divinity. The broken sword reconnected and fused into one. This time, it wasn't just a person undergoing the heavenly tribulation. Even Jiyu Fei's sky-blue immortal gold armor and 9 heavenly stars sword had to undergo the lightning tribulation before they could become extreme Tao weapons. Just as Jiyu Fei was repairing the armor and sword, a gust of wind appeared without warning. The sound of howling wind filled the sky. At this moment, the Wind Clan ancestor's embodiment of heavenly Tao was finally going to go all out. Come on. Jiyu Fei closed his eyes and stood quietly in the void with the 9 heavenly stars sword in his hand. In the next moment, an endless gust of wind surrounded Jiyu Fei. Within the gust of wind, one could vaguely see several figures. Before Jiyu Fei could do anything, the endless power of wind suddenly contracted. The violent power of wind blew the void around Jiyu Fei. The Wind Clan ancestor's embodiment of heavenly Tao was hidden in the gust of wind, becoming one with it. At the same time, a force descended from the sky. It was the 9 heavens' astral wind. As it descended, everything in its path was torn to shreds and destroyed. I'll suck. Jiyu Fei suddenly lifted his head, opened his mouth, and sucked. He actually swallowed the 9 heavens' astral wind that descended from the sky. If anyone were to see this scene, it would definitely shake the entire ancestral realm's cultivation world. It should be known that Jiyu Fei had swallowed the 9 heavens' astral wind in one gulp. Who would dare to do something so crazy? The 9 heavens' astral wind was a type of wind elemental power. This kind of wind would not appear on the ground unless someone summoned it down from the 9 heavens. Only then would this wind elemental power appear in front of Jiyu Fei. Alright, it's time. Jiyu Fei suddenly uttered these words.